From its very inception, gangsta rap has shocked and captivated the masses, even during its origins with artists like Schoolie D, Ice-T, and eventually NWA, topping charts and being regular fixtures of the news cycle. Gangsta rap was a leading force that helped hip-hop go from a new and exciting genre of music and subculture to a worldwide phenomenon, with many citing the release of Dr. Dre's album The Chronic as not only a watershed moment for gangsta rap, but hip-hop as a whole. There have been many iterations of gangsta rap throughout the years, with artists like Tupac and Biggie selling millions of records while expressing the pain that comes with street life. You also had the East Coast rappers like Jay-Z, Raekwon, AZ, and even Diddy rapping about street life but in a more glamorous style, rapping about the drug game and getting money akin to living the life of a mobster. But by the time the 2010s came around, gangsta rap would be taken to raw new heights. In Chicago, a subgenre of gangsta rap would emerge, called drill music. Drill music has its origins in the streets of Chicago, which is a region in the United States that is known as one of the most gang-dense areas of the country, and the music would be a reflection of that. Rappers like S. Dot, King Louie, and FBG Duck would rap about the reality of gang life in Chicago while referencing real-life events, but drill would really hit the mainstream with the emergence of Chief Keef. His unique style and charisma on the mic, matched with gritty lyrics and his ability to make straight-up hits, helped propel him into a rap superstar, while increasing overall interest in drill music and Chicago gang culture. Chief Keef's early music was filled with references to gang life, including shouting out his gang and their affiliates, calling out rivals, while dissing their members relentlessly. However, as Chief Keef's star grew, so did interest in Chicago's underworld and the street politics that made up the content of drill music. This would lead to DJ Academics and others starting to make content surrounding the developments in these various gang wars. But even in the earliest days of drill, a dark precedent would be set where the streets would catch up to rappers before they had the chance to make it out. Public interest in drill music would increase throughout the years, as drill blends the worlds of music and true crime in a way that really hasn't been seen before, as the lyrics could be matched up with real-life news reports. A few years after Chicago's first initial wave, you would see drill music popping up all over the country and eventually all over the world, as there are regions everywhere that fall to the ills of poverty with low income and a high crime rate. There's drill scenes in areas like the Bronx, Brooklyn, Toronto, the UK, Philly, Memphis, and Florida, among other areas, with these drill scenes having their own complex street politics and history that is often referenced in the music of these drill rappers. Which leads us to where we are today. The career renaissance of Lil Durk and the emergence of King Von has also created a dark precedent that we're still feeling today. Building on dissing your rivals and disrespecting their members in songs, King Von would take this further, as he was the top shooter for his gang O Block in the early to mid 2010s, and once he became a rapper, he would openly rap about topics like his body count, he is heavily rumored to be a part of, and the relentless dissing of the deceased, especially those he was rumored to have taken part in. But with the King Von in an unrelated incident in 2020, some say that one part of his legacy is pushing drill to its limits, which directly leads us to the chaotic and what I would call dystopian state of drill music we find ourselves in today. Drill in our modern era has blended the cloud-chasing antics of the SoundCloud era with real-life game politics, and with many rappers catching bodies and then rapping about it openly in hopes of becoming rich and becoming like the next King Von. Drill music in our modern era is just pure chaos. You have incidents like a 14-year-old drill rapper tragically losing his life in Harlem, and then a group of rivals making a song and dance about it to mock the situation and then going viral for it. You also see YouTubers being while recording hood vlogs with drill rappers. You have the rise and fall of Bloodhound Lil Jeff in just a few months, with Lil Jeff being rumored to have over 10 bodies. He would also openly rap about taking part in a very high profile dope a month after it happened, with Lil Jeff getting literally during an attempt, while being a pretty high profile rapper at that point. You also have the case of Noah Scurry, who was also known as Joker OTV, who lived a double life as a rising high school basketball star and a gang member. He was just one day after making a disrespectful drill song where he dissed his rivals and rapped about he was rumored to have taken part in. You see rappers making whole songs that are basically just them listing off ops that are no longer here. You also see some of the few survivors of the first wave of Chicago drill making whole second careers out of doing interviews speaking on old war stories and incidents from when they were younger, not to mention all the various documentaries and hood vlogs made about these rappers, their friends, and the very real life incidents referred to in these songs, with, let's just say, varying degrees of quality, which I'll get into later. All this to say that I'm not simply here to just rehash old stories throughout the various drill scenes throughout the years, but I want to paint a picture and show exactly how we got into the state that we're in today, in this modern era. I want to explain how we got here, and not just how drill music has taken over hip-hop, but the internet as a whole, and how it blends the world of music and true crime in a way that truly intrigues the public. But I want to emphasize that these are real people and this is not entertainment. So in this video, I will go in depth to explain the origins of drill music and how it initially popped off, its brief decline, and resurgence, and show how drill music slowly migrated across the United States and eventually across the entire globe, and how we got to the point that we're at today. I want to explain the stories behind some of these rappers and the people who make up the countless drill lyrics, and show exactly how kids are drawn to gang life. I also think it's important to raise some questions, like what is the line between exposure and exploitation? What are the moral and ethical implications surrounding drill music and its consumption? Is consuming drill music in some ways voyeuristic? These are just some things to think about, but with all this being said, this is the dystopian nature of drill music. But before we get started, I just want to say, I know it's been a minute since I made a video. It's just I had a lot of personal things going on in my life that just made things really chaotic for a minute. And also, if you liked the video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that. That really helps out the channel. I'm also getting over a cold, so, if that affected my voice somehow, that's why. But with all that being said, let's get into it. So in order to get a true understanding of how drill music took over hip-hop and eventually the internet, we need to go back to the beginning, and I mean all the way back. So, as we all know, hip-hop started in the early 70s in the Bronx, but it would eventually outgrow its early roots in the party scene of New York City, with DJs spinning loops and MCs hyping up the crowd. When hip-hop made its way into the music industry, at first, hip-hop was more similar to disco, and thus the earliest hits in hip-hop were considered party records. But with songs like The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, things would begin to change, as the song was not only a hit, but also critically acclaimed, as this was one of the first songs to provide social commentary through its lyrics. The lyrical themes focus on life in the inner city, poverty, and kids turning to street activity as a means of getting money. This song would also help pioneer socially conscious hip-hop as well as gangsta rap, as only a few years later, rappers began to rap about their reality growing up in poverty, which included street life, struggle, and oftentimes crime. I also want to emphasize that one thing that made hip-hop truly unique was the fact that these rappers were telling their own stories and expressing their reality through their lyrics. So even this early on, authenticity was an important part of making it in the genre. PSK by Schoolie D is often credited as the first gangster rap song, as he shouts out the Parkside Killers gang in Philly and gives an unfiltered look at street life with references to gun violence, drugs, and other things too. PSK was truly one of the first songs of its kind and influenced a whole host of artists to create similar songs lyrically and sonically. Songs like Boys in the Hood by Eazy-E and 6 in the Morning by Ice-T were directly influenced by PSK, and this created the framework for what would become gangsta rap. These early gangsta rap songs would lyrically be vivid displays of life in the streets as a hustler, and these early gangsta rap classics were some of the first songs to speak about crime in this much detail, and even rap and slang too. Hip-hop during this time was seeing a great amount of creativity and innovation, as this time is known as the golden age of hip-hop, and gangster rap was just one part of this. But with the rise of NWA, gangster rap specifically and hip-hop in general will be propelled to new heights, as the controversy surrounding everything NWA did to their lyrical themes, their name, and especially the song F the Police would see them be the subject of news reports all over the country. And in the overall landscape of 80s America, there was a bunch of fear surrounding explicit lyrics and artists in genres like metal and especially hip-hop. But that's a topic for another video. But anyways, the The group were even targeted by the FBI, but as we all know, controversy sells, and all this would only prop up NWA and gangsta rap's popularity. Gangsta rap being this force in the music and in media would see other artists taking advantage of this winning formula too. But when Dr. Dre would release the album The Chronic a few years down the line in 1992, this is seen as a watershed moment for the genre as hip-hop became fully mainstream, and many cite this as being the moment that hip-hop would become a global force. But the controversy surrounding Death Row Records also garnered interest in the music, as there are stories of Death Row partially being funded by drug lords, Suge Knight apparently holding Vanilla Ice off a balcony, and the label forcing Eazy-E through violence to let Dr. Dre start the label. These stories only helped to increase Death Row's popularity, but controversy and media attention being used as a means to get more eyes on the music would be seen as a winning formula, as other gangster rappers would use this either intentionally or unintentionally. Some instances of this would include the media's hyperfixation on covering rap beefs, eventually leading to altercations, or even as seen with Tupac and Biggie being only a year apart. The 90s would see gangster rap become basically the meta on how to make it in hip-hop. Obviously, there were other styles of hip-hop that still dominated, but many chose to rap about their time spent in the drug game before becoming a rapper, as this was still in the thick of the crack era. Also, some rappers weren't directly involved in street activity, but grew up around it, and took more of a reporting approach to making gangster rap. But the point still stands. The gangsta image was seen as a necessity by many in order to make it in hip-hop. But gangsta rap would see many iterations throughout this era, with G-Funk, the more grimy style of gangsta rap in the East Coast, to even a more dirty pimp style of hip-hop with rappers like Too Short, and also the glamorous style of mafioso rap, which would see street activity and drug dealing being compared to the, I guess, perceived elegance of the mob life, which would prove highly successful in the East Coast and even helped propel the career of Jay-Z. In the 2000s, gangsta rap would take more of a flashy turn with the rise of the bling era, but controversy was still a factor in propelling rappers' careers, as 50 Cent was a buzzing rapper, but after being shot 9 times and surviving this attack, he would see an increased level of intrigue around his name. He would use this, matched with his relentless work rate, to become one of the biggest rappers in the early 2000s. But also in the 2000s, you began to see the rise of trap in Atlanta, where they would rap about selling drugs and, well, trapping in their area, which would have a direct influence on early drill rappers, with rappers like Jeezy, T.I., and Gucci Mane being key in developing this style. The 2000s was also when you started to see rappers referencing real-life events, like when 50 Cent rapped about the man who shot him 9 times being not too long after that incident in his hit song Many Men. Later on, you saw this when Gucci Mane rapped about the self-defense he committed back in 2005 on the 2012 song Truth, where he dissed Jeezy, who he was beefing with at this time, and also his dead friend who tried to rob Gucci Mane. But soon, gangster rap would evolve to even more daring heights with the rise of drill music in the early 2010s. So even though gangster rap was a factor that would help hip-hop become a global force, with it going from an innovative style of music to a cultural juggernaut, the street image was synonymous with hip-hop. But as the genre progressed, different expressions of masculinity would become more accepted, as seen with the rise of Kanye West. And after that, rappers began to express themselves in different ways. But rappers across generations will pull from their own street experiences as inspiration for these songs that they made. And this is where the gang-dense area of Chicago comes in. So Chicago would become the breeding ground for what would become drill music, but before drill, they had a presence in hip-hop throughout the decades, with rappers like The Brat, Kanye West, Lupe Fiasco, Twista, and Common, among others, all being Chicago rappers who made an impact during the 90s and the 2000s. But the rappers who would become the pioneers of drill music would combine Atlanta-style trap beats with the real-life street politics of their respective blocks. But before we get into the rappers who would become pioneers of drill music, first I need to give you guys a little bit of context. Chicago is a city that has historically always had a gang presence. Some of the first gangs were loosely organized gangs of European immigrants throughout throughout the 1800s, and this trend would continue throughout the early 1900s, with the Chicago outfit, who thrived selling booze during the Prohibition era when alcohol was made illegal, but they had a hand in other criminal activities as well, as they would thrive under the leadership of the infamous Al Capone. Fast forward a little later, during the late 50s and early 60s, street gangs would begin to pop up all over the city, with gangs like the primarily black gangs, like the Black Disciples, Gangster Disciples, Mickey Cobras, Black P Stones, and Vice Lords popping up. You also had Hispanic gangs like the Latin Kings being formed, and one of the earliest gangs from this time period was the Almighty Gaylords, which was actually a white gang formed in 1953, which I know some of you guys are gonna go crazy clowning in the comments because of that name, so cook, I guess. But anyways, some gangs even had more political aspirations, like the conservative Vice Lords and the Black P Stone Nation, but internal disputes among many other things would see these gangs get more and more involved with street activity. Each of these gangs have their own deep history, going back decades, but to simplify how we got to this point, I'll briefly explain the roots of the Black Disciples and the Gangster Disciples, as these two gangs play an important part of how this all unfolds. David Barksdale would create the Devil's Disciples in 1958 with some friends of his, but by the time the 60s rolled around, he would take sole leadership of the gang. Barksdale's goal was to turn smaller black gangs in the area into Devil's Disciples, and in 1966, he would create the Black Disciple Nation. In 1969, David Barksdale and Larry Hoover, who was the founder of the Supreme Gangsters, would create an alliance and call themselves the Black Gangster Disciples Nation. But with Larry Hoover being convicted of murder and receiving a sentence of life plus 200 years in 1973, and David Barksdale passing away from kidney failure as a result of a gunshot wound earlier the next year, the leadership of these gangs would start to fragment. Eventually, the gangs would go their two separate ways as two distinct factions would emerge, with the Black Disciples being aligned with David Barksdale and the Gangster Disciples being aligned with Larry Hoover. But later on during the 80s and the 90s, these street gangs transformed into million-dollar criminal organizations with the rise of the crack epidemic. This was not exclusive to Chicago, however, as the crack epidemic ravaged through the whole of the United States. And as a result, these once petty street gangs would morph into full-on criminal enterprises. In Chicago, the way these gangs or criminal organizations ran was that they would control the drug trade and many of the large project buildings. For example, the Cabrini Green homes and the Robert Ickes homes were mostly ran by the GDs at this time. You had the Randolph Tower, which was known as a BD stronghold, where they apparently had snipers set up on the roof to protect their territory. Also, as a result, the wars between gangs at this time was for control over drug territories, specifically in the project buildings. But as the 2000s rolled around, there would be several big indictments on the various gangs that operated in the project buildings of Chicago, which would lead to a power vacuum with there being no real sense of leadership within the gang structure. Also, many of the project buildings that these gangs operated in were torn down in the 2000s and early 2010s, which spread out the gangs in Chicago that were once contained. So, massive crime sweeps that fractured the leadership of these gangs, combined with the projects being torn down, would create the conditions that drill music would eventually be born out of. Side note, this is also why many of the gangs that make up the early days of Chicago drill may have a heritage in the GDs, BDs, or Black P Stones, for example, but oftentimes these gangs had a mix of GDs or BDs in the same set, so their alliance was really to their block and not the wider gang which they came from, if that makes any sense, which would lead to a bunch of smaller wars between rival sets all over the city, with revenge, tit-for-tat killings being the motivating factor in these conflicts, as opposed to being simply a means to protect your drug territory and organization like in the 90s. But these conditions would have a deep impact on what would become the drill movement of the 2010s.
Getting it drill style, you know we get it drill style.
During this time, there weren't too many buzzing rappers coming out of Chicago, but quickly things would start to change. In 2009, a rapper from the Drill City set named Pac-Man started rapping as he was featured on the song Street Money, and he would quickly create a buzz for himself. Pac-Man is widely known for being the first rapper to coin the term drill music with his song It's a Drill that dropped in 2010. He didn't diss specific ops in his music, but his raps did have references to him having bodies, murder, and life as a gang member, which would set the stage for what drill music would become. Also, I like to mention that early drill music sonically was still very similar to Atlanta trap music, except the lyrics had a lot more regional references and slang that you would only really know if you were from that area. But sadly, Pac-Man wouldn't be able to see the subgenre he helped pioneer grow to the heights it did, as he was killed on June 21st, 2010 at the young age of just 25 years old. It's rumored that he was killed while shooting the music video for his song Drill Style, which is an incredibly catchy and energetic song that would eventually become his biggest song. The death of Pac-Man this early on in the development of drill music would also be the start of a dark precedent, that being young charismatic rappers being killed before their potential is truly realized. The death of Pac-Man, of course, would affect everyone around him, but this would lead rapper King Louie from the same set to really lock in as a rapper. King Louie started rapping all the way back in 2006, but he would get into a car accident which caused him to break both of his legs and required him to essentially learn how to walk again. Once fully recovered, King Louie began to drop a lot more consistently to help keep the movement that Pac-Man started going. He started buzzing in the area a lot more when he dropped the video for the song I'm Arrogant, which may have been the first time Chicago was referred to as Chirac in a song. His music had many references to gun violence, gang wars, and life as a gang member. He would continue to build on this momentum by dropping mixtapes like Man Up, Band Up, More Boss Shit, and Chirac Drillinois in 2010 and 2011. He would also help to refine the sound of early drill, as King Louie rapped over noticeably harder beats in the same vein as Waka Flocka Flame. Eventually, as his success continued to grow, he and Chief Keef would appear on the Yeezus album by Kanye West in 2013. But King Louie would be a key figure in the early years of Chicago drill, having collaborations with Chief Keef, Lil Bibby, and Lil Herb, but he was unfortunately shot in the head in 2015, but would miraculously survive this attempt on his life. He's still doing well, however, as it's heavily rumored that he is a ghostwriter for Kanye West. So as King Louie was laying the groundwork for what will become Chicago drill, the war in the south side of the city was beginning to heat up very quickly. Now, this is a story that has been told countless of times on various documentaries, but in order to get a full understanding of the origins of drill music, we have to go over it here. But it's said that the war started as both sides would have schoolyard fights and full-on brawls between gangs like STL, EBT, and Wick City, but eventually older gang members would begin to start to put guns in the hands of younger members and tell them to go get revenge, according to some sources. Once people started getting shot and lives began to get lost on both sides, there was really no going back. As we'll discuss later in the video, the conditions in which these kids grew up in, mixed with them being groomed by older members, is what turned these boys from ordinary kids to gang members and in some cases, killers. I mean, if your childhood friend was killed right in front of you and you knew who was responsible, who's to say you wouldn't choose to let it go and instead get revenge? But that's something we'll get into during my analysis. But these gangs have their roots in the 2000s, but it would really begin to heat up when an older member of STL/EBT, or St. Lawrence and Everhart, would kill a 14-year-old named Lil Chris on September 24th, 2010, and he was allegedly affiliated with the TYMB gang, or Ty You Are My Brother, but it was highly looked down upon for an older member to basically kill a child. Now, most of these tragic murders have not been solved, so there isn't any proof as to who is responsible, but these are just what the rumors are, and it is said that the murder of Tuka, who was a member of STL/EBT, was revenge for the murder of Lil Chris. And Tuka was standing at a bus stop where he was shot multiple times, seemingly for no reason. So there's a few stories out there as to what really happened, with some saying he threw up a gang sign, while others say the shooter approached and asked him when the next bus was due and then fatally shot him multiple times. Whatever happened that day, it ended in the death of a 15-year-old boy named Shondell Gregory, who was also known as Tuka. And as we'll discuss soon, his death was relentlessly mocked by his rivals in songs that would eventually become massive hits. And I'd also like to mention that the alliances between these gangs would change over time, but in the beginning of drill, the gangs TYMB, Lamron, Wick City, later known as O Block, Front Street, 600, and THF 46 were all clicked up, and they were all in wars with the gangs STL/EBT, also known as Tukaville, MOB, 051 Young Money, and Jaro City. But tensions escalated between these gangs on the south side of Chicago would coincide with the rise of drill music, with the younger generation starting to drop music consistently and creating a buzz in the area. Lil Durk from Lamron would drop his first music video for the song I'm a Hitter in March of 2011, and would drop his first mixtape later that year. The next month, E-Day and S-Dot from 600 and Chief Keef from O-Block would drop the song Hustle Hard, which is just a banger, and everybody would kill their verses. This was actually the first video to feature Chief Keef in it, but he started rapping back in 2008, and around 2011 is when things would start to seriously build for him. He would get his start rapping as a Japanese producer named GJ Ken would move to the south side of Chicago, and he quickly became friends and lived with Chief Keef's uncle named Big Keef. GJ Ken and Chief Keef quickly started to make music together as they both wanted to make it in the industry. It's said that Big Keef would even freestyle while they were recording, and while he was drunk, he would end his lines by saying A, and this helped to develop Chief Keef's style and set him apart from other rappers in the area. At the time, he was known locally for his mixtape Moolah Express, but things would quickly start to build for him. Also, DJ Ken and other producers Chief Keef worked with had a louder and more abrasive style of beat making, which would help develop drill music even more, as these high energy bangers is what really helped to build drill as a genre. Also notably, FBG Duck from STL/EBT would drop one of his first songs called Wild Out with a music video of him dissing ops and tons of references to life as a gang member. It was a pretty good song that started the career of another pioneer in the genre, but this song would start one of the first back and forths in drill music, as E-Day from 600 would drop a response with the song Fuck the Other Side, with him just absolutely sliding on that beat. But he would diss FBG Doug, Billionaire Black, and their whole side relentlessly on the beat. And this is one of the first songs I've heard in the genre where the rapper would directly rap about incidents in the street while directly dissing ops, and not just dissing but threatening to catch opposing rappers on songs. But FBG Duck and Billionaire Black would soon respond to this diss with their song E-Day's You Serious, where they rapped over the same beat and dissed E-Day and his gang with references to headshots through dreads and catching specific members. This back and forth between these two sides would increase interest in this new subgenre, and both opposing sides would start to drop music regularly. Later in the year, Chief Keef would drop In This Bitch with Lil Reese, which might be my favorite song of his from the early days, but the video was notable as it was the only video that had O.D. Perry in it, as sadly he was killed just 1 month later, and his death would be seen as a major escalation in this war. On August 6, 2011, Chief Keef would drop the song Bang, which was a hit across the city and quickly reached hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube, which back in those days was a big deal as he had no major backing at the time. Keef's more unique and original style would help set him apart from all the other rappers in his area, including the ones he aligned himself with, and it was clear that Chief Keef was going to be a star. But while Keef was building up his catalog at this young age, the war was continuing to heat up on the south side of Chicago, as a few days later, on August 10th, 2011, members of STL/EBT, Mob, and Jaro City were out partying to celebrate Duka's birthday, and they decided to shoot a music video for FBG Duck's song Freestyle. They were all drinking, getting high, and having a good time, but some of the members decided to lurk and catch some ops that night. And this was when a 20-year-old man named O.D. Perry was shot twice, once in the neck and in the back, and was unfortunately killed that night. Now, nothing's confirmed, but there's a lot of names floating around in speculation as to who is responsible for this murder, and we're not going to get into that here. The music video for Freestyle by FBG Duck was uploaded days after, but was taken down as the video was very incriminating, but it could be found on YouTube today. The Freestyle video is an early example of the music being crucially intertwined with real developments in the gang politics of Chicago, and this was a trend that would continue throughout the history of drill in Chicago and eventually all over the world. But the murder of O.D. Perry would see Wick City change their name to O-Block, as many of the younger Wick City members like T-Roy, King Von, and even Chief Keef looked up to O.D. Perry. O.D. was in the older crowd and was an original member. He is also speculated to have been a lot more advanced than other members, as his older brothers were affiliated with other gangs in the area. Whenever ops came through shooting, it's said that O.D. would defend their neighborhood, as according to J-Hood from O-Block, a young T-Roy witnessed O.D.'s final moments and heard his last words, and after this, T-Roy would change, with J-Hood telling Camp Capone News, quote,
it was sad, man. And then T-Roy was right there with him his last little moments. And T-Roy, and then T-Roy said that, oh, was like, damn, they got me, bro. Like, that was his last words into that. So that shit changed T-Roy. That shit changed T-Roy. Me, T-Roy, all us, Von, we used to be in cahoots. Yes, niggas used to have guns, but we just used to have it so that the big guys wouldn't call us pussy. It's just like when you grow up in the hood and niggas like, you ain't getting no pussy, you ain't no nothing, you a lame, you a goofy. So niggas finna do what? We finna try to fuck and do all this. We might not even want it, but like we finna try to open ourselves up to it so niggas can't talk about us. That's the world we live up in. And so, yeah, we had guns and all that, but like, man, after O died, boy, Troy and them, niggas was crawling down the porch at first. That shit happened, Troy and Von, what the niggas jumped off head first, and when they did, they jumped off at a higher level, more aggressive than the niggas who was around O was. But yeah, it was messed up, man. Seeing him die like that, man, but...
It's highly speculated that T-Roy murdered over 8 people after this, which I'll get into later, but it's events like this that desensitizes a boy to violence while warping and distorting a child's view on the world, making his main concern revenge for his friend's murder. The murders of both Tuka in 2010 and O.D. Perry in 2011 are seen as the inciting incidents that would sadly lead to dozens of murders on both sides in the years following these events. But these murders and the ones in the years following would play a crucial role in the development of drill music, as they were referenced heavily in the music, with many rappers choosing to mock the deceased to provoke their ops, with Tuka sadly being the target of relentless mocking in the years following his death. But in the year of 2012, drill would go from a regional style of gangster rap to making its way into the music industry and going mainstream.
Bands in this bitch, bands in this bitch, what I demand in this bitch.
2011 was the year that drill started to really gain traction on a local level, with rappers dissing their ops, flashing guns, and rapping in an unfiltered way about the lifestyle they lived on a daily basis. After the deaths of loved members on both sides, the gang war on the south side of Chicago would heat up as shootouts were a daily occurrence. But during this time in late 2011, Chief Keef would not slow down as he capitalized on the buzz surrounding his song, Bang, as he dropped videos for songs like It's Crackin', On That with Fredo Santana, Aimed at You, and John Madden, where he dissed Tukaville heavily and shouted out D-Rose from 600, who was a young shooter who would become infamous in the early days of drill due to being name dropped in hit songs and his reputation in the streets. Also, some of the younger guys from 600 would start to rap, with Buka, Rondo Number 9, and C-Day dropping their song, Man Down, where they dissed their ops heavily and disrespected fallen members of the other side, with C-Day specifically dissing someone who he is heavily rumored to have himself, which this early on would set a precedent that's still seen in drill today, with many rappers choosing to speak on real murders that they were involved in. But other rappers were also dropping frequently at this time, like S. Dot, Lil Durk, and Lil Reese. But 2012 would start off strong, as in January, Chief Keef would drop his song 300, where he dissed Tukaville and shouted out GBE, TYMB, and O-Block. Y'all know how it goes, but this was a huge moment for Chief Keef's career, and the development of drill, as the video has over 30 million views on YouTube, was also huge in the city. Due to the buzz surrounding the city, more people started to pay attention to this burgeoning subgenre of gangster rap, so rappers on both sides would start to drop even more. And Lil Reese would drop the song Us that would also do big numbers in March of 2012. Later that month, Lil Durk would drop his song L's Anthem, and this was another banger that was huge in the city, being his most popular song at the time. It's a catchy auto-tune laced track where he shouts out gangs like Lamron, 300, and MTV, and even gives a shout out to Rick Ross's Maybach music. But in this song, he would throw shots at gangs like Ruger World and Brick Squad, which would cause a domino effect that would have a deep impact not only on early drill music, but the war on the south side of Chicago, but we'll get into that shortly. Around this time, notably, people from the other side of this gang war decided to pick up a mic and start rapping. People like FBG Duck would drop more consistently, but other rappers started dropping music like King Little J and Dusky, among others. I like to add that FBG Duck showed a huge amount of potential during this time, in the early days of drill, but it would take a number of years before FBG Duck would really make an impact in the music industry. But even though Chief Keef wasn't dropping as much in the year 2012, there was so much buzz surrounding his name that when he did drop, it was a big deal. He wasn't dropping music due to the fact that he was on house arrest, stemming from an incident where he was chased by the police and flashed a gun at them. Apparently he was shot at, but the cops missed, which is just miraculous. Like, I can't really comprehend how close he was to possibly losing his life that day. But like the drill rappers of that era, he really lived what he rapped about. But while on house arrest at his grandma's house, he decided to shoot a music video for a new song of his. And this would be the song that would take Chief Keef and drill music to the mainstream. Of course, I'm talking about I Don't Like featuring Lil Reese. You just had to be there. The song was massive and literally everywhere. Like, I cannot overstate how big this song was. A few days later, Chief Keef would drop his Back from the Dead mixtape, which would get a lot of attention in the industry, and it also had a Soulja Boy feature as well. But the mixtape name actually comes from the fact that people thought Chief Keef died during that incident with the cops back in 2011. But soon after the release of this mixtape, a bidding war started with a bunch of major labels wanting to sign a young 16-year-old Chief Keef. He eventually decided to sign with Interscope Records, and it was reported that his deal was worth over $6 million, with an extra $400,000 being a part of that deal so that he could start GBE Records, also known as Glory Boys Entertainment. But later that year, this song would get a remix by Kanye West that featured Pusha T, Jadakiss, and Big Sean. Chief Keef would continue to drop music videos throughout the year, as he had more eyes on him than ever. And later in the year, he would drop another massive hit. He would also drop compilations with his label mates in GBE throughout 2012 as well. Also notably, later in that year, on the east side of Chicago, in August of 2012, rappers like G Herbo and Lil Bibby would drop their song Kill Shit, that is still one of their biggest songs. It's truthfully one of the best songs of this era of Chicago drill, with Lil Herb spitting a cold verse, which just has this really tight flow. Lil Herb shouts out their gang, NLMB, or No Limit Muskegon Boys, which are a set of black P-Stones in the area, and raps casually about dropping bodies and putting in work for his set, while Bibby comes through with a more laid-back verse that still goes hard. Lil Herb was already buzzing with his song Gangway that dropped in June, and the song actually later got a remix with Lil Reese. According to interviews, Lil Reese actually went to school with Herb, and that's how he hopped on the track. But NLMB would have a close relationship with Chief Keef's Glory Boys Entertainment, as Keef signed Capo, who was actually from No Limit Muskegon Boys, and this connection would be seen later as G Herbo would collab with King Von in 2020. Anyways, the success of G Herbo and Lil Bibby shined an even bigger light on drill music, as it wasn't just relegated to the south side, but it was a phenomenon that would impact the whole city and soon hip-hop as a whole. But there were other rappers from that area dropping music like EBK Juvie, and I like to note that NLMB is a bigger gang that beefs heavily with a lot of smaller gangs in the east side. So naturally, after this, their ops would drop music too, like KTS Vaughn, who had a fierce reputation in the streets with multiple being attached to his name, and others from their opposing gang. KTS Vaughn was another person who would add to the dark trend of being a part-time rapper but a full-time gang member, where music is seen as a means to provoke your enemies. But also I like to mention that DJ L, who produced many of the early hits from G Herbo and Lil Bibby, would sonically make a deep impact on drill, as his early songs featured a unique production style that had unorthodox hi-hat rolls and snare hits. This technique of making beats would heavily influence the sound of UK drill just a few years later, with many early UK drill producers being influenced by DJ L's style but adding their own flavor to the beats. This would then travel back to the US as Brooklyn drill rappers began to rap over UK drill beats, with that being a key characteristic of what would become Brooklyn and Bronx drill. But to go back to the south side real quick, later in the year, in August of 2012, Lil Jojo from Brick Squad, a set of renegade GDs, would drop his first song called BDK, which stood for Black Disciple Killer, also known as 300K. According to his brother Swag De Niro, Lil Jojo wasn't even a rapper, but once he heard Lil Durk's song L's Anthem playing on the radio, Lil Jojo was furious, as the song featured disses aimed at Brick Squad, and L's Anthem was getting major airplay all over the city, so he decided wanted to make his first song. Originally, Lil Jojo wanted FBG Young from STL/EBT to be a part of the song, but in an interview, his older brother FBG Cash would reveal that he advised Young not to be a part of this song. This was due to the fact that being a little older, he understood that this song would make his brother a huge target all over the city, explaining, quote,
like he did some shit and he called me and he was like, man, I got this song, I want your brother to get on. Ooh, I'm finna send it to you. I'm like, all right, send it to me. I was on house arrest. I had 2 years on house arrest. He sent it to me. And then before I even replied to him, like, I replied to Young, like, boy, don't get on that song. Like, cause it was the BDK. Like, Young supposed to been on there. Like, no cap. Young supposed to been on there. I'm like, boy, you gonna make everybody mad. Like, I know, fuck music, folks, streets. Like, niggas you never see. You just blatantly disrespecting the whole BD as one, and I'm one love. So that's GD and BD at the same time. We cousins, you know what I'm saying? So motherfucker, I'm like, damn, it's gonna get fucked up. Hell yeah, we have. We were family, bro. Like, shit, about my dog.
This was due to the fact that Lil Jojo wasn't just dissing a few gangs that he was beefing with, but he was dissing a whole nation. Even if the modern gangs of Chicago are mixed with different members having origins in different gangs, many of them share a heritage in the BDs. So instead of just a few sets he was beefing with wanted to cause him harm, essentially all BD sets from the area took offense and wanted to make an example out of a young Lil Jojo. But the amount of disrespect in the song is what would also see the music video quickly reach over 1 million views, which back in those days was a big deal, as it wasn't as common as it is today. In the song, he dissed Dirk by name, threatening to catch him, and boldly proclaimed that this is not a song, just a message. After this, more rappers who were opposing Chief Keef and his side of this gang war started to drop a lot more. Later that month, he would drop the song Tied Up, which saw a Chief Keef lookalike being tied up in the music video. And even if he wasn't the best rapper, Lil Jojo did show promise, as he had a voice that was just made for rapping. But only a month later, after the release of the song BDK, Lil Jojo would be tragically murdered. On the day of September 4th, 2012, Lil Jojo would catch Lil Reese outside of his home, where he and his brother would curse at Reese, calling him a bitch, among other things. In the video, you could hear someone scream at Lil Jojo that they're gonna kill him. Later that day, Lil Jojo would put that video up on YouTube and diss Lil Reese heavily on Twitter. He would make a fatal mistake, however, tweeting out his location by saying, quote, "I'm on 069, I'm out here," around 6 p.m. About an hour later, at 7:30 p.m., there were reports of shots fired, and there's footage of all this online. Thankfully, you can't see the actual shooting, but in this footage, you could clearly see someone riding their bike, and Lil Jojo was on the handlebars. 3 cars would come flying by, and both of them would hop off the bike, running in opposite directions. There were 6 9mm shell casings found at the scene, and Lil Jojo, real name Joseph Coleman, got hit in the back once, and he was taken to the University of Chicago Commerce Children's Hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. People online would speculate that these 3 cars were filled with shooters from different BD gangs from the West One-Law neighborhood, including Old Block, 600, Lamron, and Blackgate, among others. A few hours after he was killed, Chief Keef would tweet out saying, "It's sad cause Jojo just wanted to be like us, #LMAO. But as his story gained national attention, he was forced to backpedal, as he would tweet out his condolences to Lil Jojo and his family while claiming he was hacked. Lil Jojo's unfortunate death was the start of a trend that would be seen throughout the history of drill, that being rappers being killed for making disrespectful songs. Many online theorize that these gangs want to make an example out of the rivals who make these relentless diss songs, and make it a point to make sure that these rappers can't get away with this. But like many things in the drill world, this can't exactly be proven. In spite of the controversy surrounding Chief Keef's name, and many believing he has something to do with the death of Lil Jojo, with the backing of Interscope Records, he would drop another hit that was arguably bigger than I Don't Like. In October of 2012, he would drop a song titled Love Sosa that was just everywhere at this time. The intro comes from a video that went viral at the time, where this dude is ranting about how real Chief Keef is, and that video is still iconic till this day. The hook is just catchy as hell, and this song did even more to boost the career of Chief Keef in the rap game and bring even more eyes on this burgeoning subgenre of gangster rap called drill music. We all know this one, but in the song, Keef shouts out Glory Boys, Old Block, and the teenage shooter D-Rose from 600. Many see D-Rose getting shouted out on his songs combined with his reputation in the streets as the reason why he was targeted heavily by the Chicago Police Department, highlighting another dark aspect of the genre that's still seen today. In December of 2012, he would drop his first album titled Finally Rich, which had a lot of big name features on it and cemented him as one of the biggest rappers of the decade. But this was really the moment that the floodgates were open with drill music, and now all eyes were on the young Chief Keef, Glory Boys Entertainment, and by proxy, Lil Durk, OTF, and Lil Reese too. But this was also when public interest would increase not only in the music, but in the events surrounding the music, which oftentimes revolved around the murders of young men and even innocent civilians in proximity to these various gang wars ravaging the city of Chicago. This was also when more ops would diss Chief Keef, his affiliates, and the gangs he was associated with a lot more, as these young gang members wanted to put on for their side musically, diss their ops, and defend themselves in the eyes of the public, especially since the BDs had more traction musically. Tukaville would particularly go hard, as their deceased friend, Shondale, aka Tuka, was dissed relentlessly on a worldwide stage, and this infuriated the young members still in the streets of Chicago. Anyways, with all eyes on Chicago in the early 2010s, going into the year 2013, a lot more rappers would pop up with younger members of 600 starting to drop consistently too, with LA Capone dropping his first song Murder in January of 2013, where he matched hard and gritty lyrics about gang life and carrying guns, but with a noticeably smoother and more laid back style of delivery. A week later, he would drop Face Down with Rondo No. 9, where they would both diss deceased rivals, threaten to catch people claiming BDK, and shout out Team 600. But notably during this time, Lil Reese and Lil Durk would both sign deals with Def Jam Records, giving Lil Durk's OTF label a bigger backing. In April 2013, he would drop his biggest song at the time, and his first as a Def Jam artist, titled This Ain't What You Want, where he would rap transparently about life in the streets, rapping about people snitching on his pops Big Durk, shouting out Lamron, and threatening to catch ops who diss him and his gang. But during this time, Chief Keef would drop on a regular basis throughout the year to build up hype for his Bang Part 2 mixtape that he would drop in August. While many of the rappers from the BD side were making their way into the music industry and building their careers, the war on the south side of Chicago was seeing an unprecedented amount of murders on both sides that would only get worse throughout the decade. Many of these teenage shooters would begin to gain recognition as they were name dropped on big songs, and they weren't even rappers. They would gain followings on social media just for being named in songs by famous rappers. People like T-Roy, D-Rose, K.I., and even Wooski and Scrap would see their reputations and profile raised as the dirt attached to their names in the streets, combined with their name being dropped in famous songs, saw them gain notoriety just for being gang members basically. Rappers on the GD side were still dropping too, but their videos at the time didn't look as professional, but they were still repping for their side on songs. Side note, many believe that the GDs were blackballed from the music industry, as a lot of their rappers like Duck, King Lil J, and even Dooski showed a lot of promise, especially early on, but they never got signed, or when they did get signed, it was years later. It may have been the music industry and the gatekeepers trying to prevent a full-on gang war on the south side of Chicago making its way into the music industry and big events. I could actually see this as during the advent of gangster rap in the 90s, the Crips and Bloods had altercations, and in the early 2010s, they were only about 15 years removed from the whole East Coast West Coast thing that resulted in the deaths of Tupac and Biggie. Whatever it was, FBG and their whole side had to scratch and claw their way into the music industry. Anyways, in June of that year, Boss Top and Lil Durk would drop their banger 30 Choppers, which many look back on fondly, as this was a time when everyone on their side was still cool with each other, and many members were still alive. Later that month, since there were a lot of rappers coming out of Team 600 at the time, they would drop the posse cut titled 600 that is seen as a drill classic by many, as it's a more laid back and melodic song where E-Day, LA Capone, S-Dot, and Rondo shouted out their crew and paid homage to their friends who lost their lives in the gang war. But LA Capone would continue to raise his profile that year, as his laid-back style was really resonating with fans of the early drill wave. He would drop Round Hair in July of 2013, and later that year, LA Capone and Rondo No. 9 would drop their biggest song together, titled Play for Keeps, where they rapped over this sinister-sounding piano beat, where LA rapped about the highs and lows of gang life, while shouting out Team 600 and dissing Tuka by rapping, quote, "Shondale, how that hot shit feel." His flow is smooth and effortless on here, as he raps about the reality of this lifestyle that they live in the city, while showing off his technical abilities as an MC. Then Rondo comes in with a verse that's not the most lyrical, but has an incredible amount of energy as he shouts out C-Day and Taste 600 while saying he's GDK and dissing Brick Squad heavily. The video also shows Lil Durk in it prominently, as he was clearly co-signing the younger rappers in 600 who were organically building up a buzz for themselves. Overall, this is just a song that's very captivating, even in comparison to the great amount of quality songs dropped during that era. In September of that year, Rondo number 9 would drop arguably his biggest song, the Hang With Me remix, that dissed Tuka heavily, dissed 051 Young Money, and dissed Lil Jojo too. This song, being as big as it was, made it so people were singing the lyrics of Rondo dissing Tuka, but not even really knowing that he was dissing a deceased kid, instead thinking that it may have been Chicago slang for weed. 600 were organically building up a buzz for themselves during this early wave of Chicago drill by dropping quality music on a consistent basis, and all eyes were on them. It was clear that the crew had an incredible amount of star power, as they had multiple rappers getting millions of views by that point. LA Capone was clearly the star of the crew, as he had charisma on the mic, great skills at putting rhymes together, and versatility that really wasn't seen at this time. However, in September of 2013, things would begin to fall apart for Team 600. On September 26, 2013, LA Capone went to a studio to record a verse for the song that would become Brothers with Lil Durk and Rondo number 9. He was in the studio for about 2 hours. Apparently, someone who was a member of 757, who are a gang that's close to 051 Young Money, would text members of 051 telling them that LA was in the studio dissing them. 051 were looking to get revenge as a member of theirs, named Fathead, real name Antonio Davis, was killed brutally in June of 2012, and it's heavily rumored that C-Day from 600 was responsible for this. He was only 14 years old, and members of 051 wanted revenge badly, so when they had LA's location, they pulled up to the studio in 2 separate cars and waited for him to leave. They waited for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then LA left the studio through the back with fellow rapper JB Bin Laden, and he started walking into the alley alone where he was on the phone, with many believing he was looking for a ride. 051 Lil Mick got out the car when he spotted him and shot LA twice in the upper right thigh and the back. They say that Lil Mick attempted to stand over him, but his gun jammed. LA was also shot in that same area of the leg a year prior, which many think played a part in his death. He lost consciousness in the ambulance and sadly died in the hospital. He was only 17 years old when he passed away, and he was so young with the world in the palm of his hands, as it was obvious a young LA Capone was destined for greatness. The trend of rappers being killed right as they're on the cusp of making it big and out of their ruthless environment is a trend that's still seen today. But aside from his talent, one thing that made him so captivating to listeners was that he really lived the life that he rapped about. It's heavily rumored that LA Capone took part in a brutal murder with O Block members King Von and J Money, where they stood over Jarrell City member P5, and, well, you guys could imagine what happened next. In spite of his great level of talent, the dirt he may have been a part of in the streets, sadly, caught up to a young LA Capone. After the untimely death of LA Capone, who was 600's biggest star, the other members of 600 would carry the torch going into 2014, with Rondo number 9 especially dropping standout songs during this period. However, 600 would continue to take losses, as in February 2014, Rondo number 9 and C-Day were involved in a murder of an innocent cab driver named Javon Boyd, who was just working his shift that night. Some say it was a case of mistaken identity, but to make a long story short, there is a pile of evidence against them, as the whole thing was caught on camera, and Rondo was wearing a distinct orange camel tracksuit that made it very easy for him to be identified. Also, he apparently touched Javon's car, thus leaving fingerprints on the scene. And C-Day even left his cell phone at the crime scene as well. All this would lead to the pair being found guilty, where C-Day would get sentenced to 38 years, and Rondo number 9 would be sentenced to 39 years. Also, D-Rose from 600 would be charged and found guilty of the murder of a 14-year-old named Venzel Richardson, also known as Big V, who was affiliated with Taekwon World, who are close with STL. Most people surrounding the situation say he didn't even commit this murder, but he was targeted by CPD for his reputation and being well known for the fact that he was name dropped in multiple hit songs. But regardless, The young 17-year-old's name was connected to multiple murders in the gang war on the south side of Chicago. But like most of these cases in this story, these murders are unsolved and it's mere speculation. I'll get into this a little later during my analysis, but I just like to mention that people like Rondo and D-Rose are around the same age as some of my family members. So when I look at the way their lives turned out, where the only updates the public gets is evolution of mugshots, and I look at what some of my family members were able to do and accomplish in the past 10 years, it deeply saddens me that their lives turned out this way, which is the result of being sucked into the gang life, where the only two results are death or incarceration. In spite of the setbacks faced by Team 600, 2014 was still a major year in the development of drill music, as rappers like Lil Reese, Lil Durk, and Chief Keef would all drop consistently, but Keef would start to drift away from the raw sound of the early drill era as he would start to experiment with this sound, dropping high energy bangers but with a more drugged out feel to it, with many calling this his Xanax era. Also, by this time, Chief Keef would fully distance himself from O Block and his friends from his own neighborhood. But to make a long story short, tensions between several of the gangs that made up 300 and their side were simmering since about 2013. A lot of it had to do with inter-gang politics, which really is none of my business, but all these internal issues will lead to a wedge being formed between Lil Durk's OTF and Chief Keef's GBE label as well. Some of the incidents surrounding this split includes it being rumored that Keef didn't pay Durk's bail when he got caught with a gun in June of 2013, and members of O Block rumored to feel slighted after Keef wouldn't help them out financially, thus resulting in Boss Top and other members running in Chief Keef's house in March of 2014, stealing jewelry and other items. TJ Academics will call Boss Top, quote, the diaper bandit, when covering this incident, which I'll get into shortly. A few weeks after this, when Trey 5 from O Block got locked up, Chief Keef didn't pay his bail, and this led to Boss Top and others running into Chief Keef's manager's house, but Keef wasn't there at the time. A lot went down this day, but I don't want to get too into that. But Chief Keef's older cousin, Blood Money, is rumored to have shot someone in this incident, with theories spreading online that he was killed for this a month later by O Block members, which is still debated by drill fans today. But Lil Durk would apparently take O Block's side in all this, and I bring all this up to say that after all these things went down, Chief Keef would distance himself fully from his friends from O Block, instead choosing to have only a small circle around him with close friends and family members. From this point forward, Keef didn't feel the pressure to use his money and influence to essentially fund his side of the gang war, which means buying guns for them and bailing members out of jail. Take Capone would touch upon this subject in an interview with Can Capone News, where he said, quote,
and on top of that, like bro, So did do a lot. I hate when even made it seem like he never did shit before they started asking him for shit. Like, So did shit, bro. Like, I can't even talk about some of the shit he actually put out here in the hood, because probably get booked. Don't believe, but like, bro, he did enough. He did a lot, folks. Like, he did some things. Now, did he come out and do what Vaughn was doing with his money? No. You know what I'm saying? But, bro, this is why I tell all the time about being the first to do some shit. You don't have people to follow. You know what I'm saying? When you're the first person to do something, you don't have a example to come behind for you to follow.
But this decision would pay off in the long run, as he is now seen as one of the few people to make it out of the drill scene unscathed. And till this day, he doesn't even acknowledge his friends from his own neighborhood. But while this was all going on March 25th, 2014, Lil Mark from 051 Young Money would drop his remix to Lil Durk's Competition, where he titled his song No Competition. This was a ruthless song that dissed 10 of 051's ops that got killed in the gang war, and friends of theirs too, within the first 30 seconds. He also shouts out his little brother Tuka in the song as well. This to me is one of the first songs of its kind, as other drill songs might throw shots at their ops and diss the dead, but No Competition was completely dedicated to dissing people that got killed, who were in opposition to 051. There's even a clip of Lil Reese on FaceTime with Lil Mark in the video, which might seem strange, but this is actually pretty common in Chicago, as a lot of people who would eventually become enemies were actually childhood friends once upon a time, which in retrospect is a damn shame. But I will say that Lil Mark did show promise, as he blended ruthless dissing with wordplay in a way that drill rappers really didn't do at this time. The level of disrespect in the song quickly made the video go up in views, and it got a lot of attention early on, but getting all these eyes on his music was as a result of the dissing, and this made him a target. The next day, Lil Mark's ops would apparently catch him at the bus stop and attempt to kill him, but he would escape this incident unharmed. 2 days later, however, he was caught at this same bus stop where he was shot multiple times and pronounced dead at the scene. Lil Mark was only 20 years old, and eerily, he was killed the same way as his brother Tuka was just 3 years before. It's heavily rumored that people like D Rose and King Von were involved in this, and they even passed by the crime scene later that day and recorded a video mocking the whole situation. But the death of Lil Mark was a stark reminder of the consequences of this lifestyle that many impoverished youth find themselves in, as he was tragically killed just days after dropping what many consider the most disrespectful song in drill history. But on the music side of things, 2014 was another big year for drill, as many of the popular rappers who made up this early era were still dropping on a regular basis, with G Herbo dropping the mixtapes Welcome to Phasoland and the Pistol P Project, which were both dedicated to friends of his that were killed in 2010 and 2013 respectively. Lil Bibby was also really consistent at this time too, as he dropped the Free Crack mixtape series, and notably, his lyrics were mostly about getting money and hustling, as he never really name-dropped ops or disrespected the dead. But also, the FBG side were dropping a lot at this time too, and they were getting a lot of buzz in the area. However, they were not seeing the same success as their rivals did during this time. King Lil J was seeing a big level of organic success, dropping songs like Bars of Clout, Also Arrogant with Billionaire Black, Take You Out Your Glory, and Hang With Me freestyle. King Lil J was clearly the fan favorite at this time, as other drill rappers were stepping away from the raw and gritty sound from 2011 and 2012, so many saw King Lil J as being the best during this time. It's clear that he had the skills, personality, and talent to make it. However, in spite of getting millions of views on his videos organically, he wasn't picked up by a label, with many citing this as further proof that the GDs were blackballed in the industry. But in spite of this, they would still push forward with dropping music and making a name for themselves in this era. While all the new developments were going on in drill music, whether it had to do with the music or all the things going on outside of it, a buzzing YouTuber in his own right would notice the public interest surrounding drill and capitalized on it. He is professionally known as DJ Academics. By the time 2014 rolled around, DJ Academics grew his YouTube channel significantly by covering news and hip-hop, developing beefs in the culture, and also by having hot takes when it came to certain rappers and their musical output. The way DJ Academics would describe it in an interview with Andrew Callahan, when covering Chief Keef and the rise of drill music early on, he would describe Keef's music as basically a victory lap, but fans were quick to correct him in the comment section, explaining that the war isn't over and the violence is still raging on between both sides. Ack would then create a separate YouTube channel dedicated to the developments in drill and Chicago gang culture called The War in Chirac, due to the fact that rappers on the other side weren't really known outside of fans of drill. The series on YouTube would quickly go viral, as there are videos on the channel with well over 1 million views. But the way he would talk about these developments in the early drill scene would rub a lot of people the wrong way. Ack would use a more satirical style when covering these beefs in the music and in the streets, which oftentimes included murder. He was essentially clowning gangbanging culture as a whole, as the way he would describe it, he was attempting to show that this lifestyle really wasn't worth it. But this was at the expense of real-life murders and incidents happening in the streets. He would call the people he was covering in these videos, let's just keep it YouTube friendly and say raccoons for participating in all this, if you know what I'm getting at. He would also notably give rappers nicknames, like calling Lil Reese the Grim Reaper, as in his videos, he would say that Lil Reese just has a bunch of dead people in his Twitter mentions, or calling Lil J the Chirac Wolverine, as Lil J survived being shot 15 times in 2 separate incidents. Giving these rappers nicknames, in my eyes, added to the distorted view that people had on these drill rappers, looking at all this like it's a reality show for our entertainment, which I'll dive deep into a little later. But DJ Academics did face pushback on how he covered drill music, and a few years later, in 2017, on the show Everyday Struggle, Chicago rapper Vic Mensa would check Ack in person for covering someone who he knew personally and grew up with named Trey 57, who got killed in 2014. Mensa's gripe with Ak was on how he clowned and mocked the deaths of people who were killed in these gang wars while making a profit. Ak would attempt to defend himself in this discussion, but he was definitely caught off guard during this exchange. I'd also like to mention that during this time, there were other Chicago rappers making waves, but had more of a conscious style to them. Rappers like No Name, Chance the Rapper, Vic Mensa, Saba, Smino, and among others would make waves in hip-hop with a more lyrical and jazzy style. But with the rise of the War in Chirac series and other YouTube channels like College Kid, now people were getting, essentially, play-by-play updates on the developing beefs in the city, murders happening in Chicago, and how it was all intertwined with the music. But Zach TV was also making videos around this time, but instead, he would take a different approach, as he would go into different rappers' hoods and interview them from all sides in an unbiased way, which resulted in what many would consider classic interviews. But while Chicago drill was beginning to cool down in 2015 as a result of rappers getting locked up or being killed before they could make it out of the streets, drill's impact was being felt this early on as it started to influence gangsta rap all over the US and abroad.
That's face open, cut out, then change clothes, then duck the feds, I'm in plain clothes.
While in 2014, drill in Chicago was starting to see a new level of coverage and visibility due to independent YouTubers covering the developments in the genre, the style of drill in Chicago would begin to be emulated. Many debate online whether or not the song is considered drill, trap, or just gangster rap, but in August of 2014, Brooklyn rapper Bobby Shmurda would drop the song, let's just call it Hot Boy. I may be mixed, but I'm hella white passing, so let's just call it Hot Boy from here on out. But this song was absolutely massive, and being from New York, it was everywhere when it first came out. But the song was raw and had this captivating energy to it, even having the viral Shmoney dance to go along with it. In spite of the virality of the song, Hot Boy was still a raw street banger that had many references to murdering ops, while Bobby Shmurda also shouts out a bunch of his friends for the work that they may have put in the streets. Many debate if this is a drill song or not, due to the fact that stylistically, the beat is more of a trap beat that's reminiscent of early Meek Mill, while the people who consider it drill say it's due to the subject matter of the lyrics, which was proven to be accurate as time went on. Either way, Hot Boy brought some new life into New York gangster rap that wasn't really hitting like it used to. Now, Bobby Shmurda was a part of the GS9 Crips, and gay culture in New York has a vast history, but to make a long story short, the original street gangs in New York during the 70s like the Savage Nomads, the Savage Skulls, Black Spades, Ghetto Brothers, and Seven Immortals among others agreed to peace after the murder of Black Benji, who was the leader of the Ghetto Brothers and became an activist who advocated for peace between gangs. After the gangs of the 70s agreed to peace, gangs weren't really a thing in the Northeast, as during the crack era, it was just crews like the Supreme Team or the Yellow Top Crew, and the Junior Black Mafia based out of Philly among others, who focused on getting money. But as the 1990s rolled around, many gangs like the Crips, the Bloods, Gangsta Disciples, and Latin Kings would migrate to the city as many members had family there or traveled to the city as fugitives, which is why gangs in New York City in this modern era mostly have its origins in other parts of the country. Anyways, Bobby Shmurda would come up fast after dropping the hit Hot Boy that peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Top 100. He would follow up the song with Bobby Bitch and Computers with Rowdy Rebel, which was another massive hit. However, as a New Yorker myself, the NYPD really doesn't play when it comes to stuff like this, and they have a reputation. They have a hard-on-crime type of approach that is still seen today with the many large indictments that plague many drill rappers. So in December 2014, about 4 months after Bobby Shmurda made a name for himself in hip-hop with his smash hit, he would be hit with a massive conspiracy case against the GS9 Crips, where him and over a dozen others were charged with a long list of crimes which included murder, attempted murder, assault, and drug dealing. Bobby himself was charged with conspiracy, reckless endangerment, and drug and gun possession as well. He later pleaded guilty to 1 count of third-degree conspiracy and 1 count of weapons charges, and he was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with him taking more time to make sure his friend, Rowdy Rebel, would get a lighter sentence, which is a move that many praised in hip-hop. But the quick rise and fall of Bobby Shmurda in 2014 would be the start of a trend that's still being seen in New York drill, that being the streets catching up to promising young rappers as they build a buzz for themselves, and they're still in the process of trying to make it out of the hood. But also in 2014 was around the time where UK drill started to really come into its own, as the scene was initially heavily influenced by Chicago drill, but they would expand on that sound and add their own unique characteristics into the mix. Now, England has always had a vibrant music scene, as in the 2000s and early 2010s, grime and road rap were the dominant forms of hip-hop in that area, with grime blending genres like hip-hop, UK garage, and more electronic style rhythms to create something truly unique. To make a long story short, gangs like 6-7 and 150 would start to pioneer their own style of gangster rap from the UK that would eventually become UK drill. These gangs were based out of South London and were initially cool with each other, but they fell out and started to beef with each other around the late 2000s. Both sides had rappers that would give vivid tales of street life in their music, but they weren't dissing at the time. 150 had rappers like Styx and M-Darg, while 6-7 had rappers like Scribs, Dimsy, Monkey, and Bully Green. These groups were making music as far back as 2012, but they would rap over more dancehall or 2000s UK rap-inspired beats. But eventually, these rappers would start rapping over more Chicago-style drill beats, but things would really start to pick up in September of that year as Styx dropped his song Really in the Fields. Scribs and Monkey from 6-7 would then hop on the same beat while dissing the other side. Later on in 2013, Styx and M-Darg would drop the song It's Cracking, responding to the dissing by Scribs and the gang 6-7, and this is seen as one of the first real UK drill songs, and is seen as a classic in the genre. But this would result in Scribs, Monkey, and Dimsy dissing 150 back over the same beat in the song called It's Frying, that was also very popular too. After this, UK drill was in full swing, and the genre has its own deep and complex gang politics. That's way too much to get into in this video. However, this includes full-on knife fights in the streets with members of OFB and N9 out of North London, and various other gangs beefing and dissing each other on wax, like the gangs Moscow 17 and Zone 2 as well. The differences in free speech laws in the United Kingdom has also seen UK drill rappers being banned from making music, with court orders demanding that they can't make music without police permission, which was also the case for the Cherish God More or CGM music collective. These laws would also affect the pioneers of the genre like Scribs from 6-7, and in 2014 he was banned from making music and performing for 2 years under the antisocial behavior order in the UK. However, he would change his name to LD, starting to make music under that name instead, and wearing a mask to hide his identity during the time of this ban. But while drill was expanding to different regions in the United States and globally, there was still activity in Chicago, specifically in the north side of the city. Of course, I'm talking about the rise of young Pappy. So Pappy was really coming to his own as a rapper in 2014 and started to see some serious buzz in the area. He was someone who always wanted to rap, and according to his younger brother Tay Sav, as young as 4 years old, he started rapping for fun, and he would even read the dictionary to learn new words to put in his verses. He would also read rhyming dictionaries to get better at pairing words together in his raps. He started dabbling in making music as young as 12 years old, as he started to put out his own songs in 2007, which could still be found on the internet today. However, the streets got a hold of Pappy at a young age, as he was from 2 different sets of the Gangster Disciples, one being called Pooh Bear Gang, or PBG, and another called TFG, which are from the uptown area of Chicago. This was since he moved around a lot and made friends very easily, so he was deeply involved with both of these sets. But as he got deeper and deeper into gang life, he started getting locked up as a juvenile, getting locked up on various petty criminal charges like possession of a weapon, disorderly conduct, and weed possession. But it was while Pappy was serving his time, he would decide to take rapping seriously, and according to his younger brother Tay Sav, he had notebooks filled with verses, and in 2013, he started dropping music videos and gaining somewhat of a buzz. Also, his younger brother would point out on No Jumper how young Pappy was actually more of a lyrical type of rapper, but he felt that he had to dumb down his lyrics in order to get people to like it. This is evident in some of his early songs like It's a Drill and They Know, where these are still quality songs, but in comparison to his later work, it lacks the personality and raw energy he would become known for. However, he would get locked up a lot during this time, which would affect the consistency of his musical output. But once he got out of jail, he started taking rapping even more seriously and really locked in. He quickly set himself apart from the rest of the drill rappers in Chicago with the release of his first mixtape titled 2 Cups Part 1, which was an ode to young Pappy's friend 2 Cups, who was killed back in November of 2013. In these later songs, it's evident that Pappy stopped trying to adjust his style to what was hot, and he started to lean into the characteristics that truly made him special as a rapper. His uniquely off-kilter, aggressive delivery and cadence, matched with his talent for wordplay and punchlines, more reminiscent of lyrical rappers, set Pappy apart from the crowd very quickly, and this was what made many consider him one of the best rappers to ever come out of Chicago. He would match these dark and descriptive lyrics about murders and catching ops with top-notch wordplay in a way that really hasn't been seen since. The song Homicide is a perfect example of this. The lyrics on 2 Cups Part 1 was something special, as Pappy would rap honestly about life in the streets, as he would diss ops with confidence, but also he would express the pain that came from this lifestyle he chose to be a part of as a child in a way that was transparent and often prophetic. But notably, as talented as he was as a rapper, the thing that made him buzz in the city was also the fact that Pappy was living the life that he rapped about, as he had a fierce reputation in the streets. Nothing is confirmed, but young Pappy's name has been linked to multiple murders on his rivals, and this added to the perceived authenticity of his music that is critical to fans of hip-hop and drill music in particular. Young Pappy continued to drop consistently after the release of 2 Cups Part 1, and in November, as he took the dark style of drill but made it his own, which oftentimes included rapid-fire flows. All of this made it clear that he was up next. He even dropped what I think was the best remix to Chief Keef's song Finito. However, his talent in the booth and the buzz surrounding his name made him a target, as the cops wanted to lock him up as soon as they could. In one incident, the Chicago Police Department ran through his mother's house looking for a gun after he was allegedly involved in an incident, but failed to find one. But also, his ops wanted him just as bad, as he was a known shooter and was extremely disrespectful on songs. There were multiple attempts on his life, where on 2 separate occasions, innocent bystanders got caught in the crossfire and tragically were killed. In spite of this, he continued to push forward, dropping more music and building a name for himself. Young Pappy was being seen as one of the best rappers in the city and beginning to be noticed by the wider hip-hop culture. Part of this had to do with the fact that he was blending relentless dissing with lyrical finesse in a way that's never been seen before, and on May 8, 2015, he would drop his second mixtape, titled 2 Cups Part 2. While he was celebrating the mixtape release and his birthday, which was 2 days later, with a party, neighbors called the cops, as people in the party let off shots in the air. The cops would decide to bring the SWAT team, which resulted in a 5-hour standoff, but this ended in the police rounding everyone up, arresting young Pappy and about 30 others for disorderly conduct. In spite of all this going on, he was still deeply focused on his music, preparing to make it out of Chicago and make it as a rapper, as this was his childhood dream. He would drop the music video for his song Shooters with Lil Sean that saw him rapping with a calmer delivery but featured a rapid-fire flow. However, this would be his last music video, as he was killed just a week later. At about 1:35 a.m. on May 29, 2015, young Pappy, real name Shaquan Thomas, was walking by himself on the 4800 block of North Kenmore Avenue, where he was shot 2 times in the back by an unknown gunman. He was later tragically declared dead within 30 minutes at Advocate, Illinois Masonic Medical Center. Young Pappy's story highlights yet another case of a young talented rapper's career and life being cut short due to the streets catching up to them. Pappy really rapped about what he lived, and that was part of the reason why he has so much buzz in the drill scene. This, matched with his unparalleled lyrical ability, high energy, and off-kilter, aggressive style of rapping, is the reason why he is still seen as one of the best rappers to ever come out of the city. However, his name was attached to multiple murders, and his disrespectful lyrics made him a huge target, not only to his enemies, but the police as well. So in spite of his unmatched talent as an MC, this was a story that sadly could not have ended well. So during the years 2015 and 2016, overall interest in drill music began to decline, as many of the key figures in the early drill movement either got locked up, getting decades in prison, or got killed as they were coming up and near the point of making it out of the rough environment they grew up in. Also, rappers like Lil Reese and most of the rappers from FBG were really inconsistent during this time, rarely dropping music. Chief Keef also ended up getting dropped by Interscope Records in late 2014. Chief Keef would still drop music on a regular basis, even scoring another smash hit in late 2014 with the song Finito, but things were starting to cool down for him. He was still highly respected in hip-hop, as by this point, his influence was beginning to be seen, and Keef still had a dedicated fan base, but on a mainstream level, things were definitely starting to cool down. Lil Durk was also going through a rough period in his career, as it was clear that Def Jam didn't really know how to utilize him, even pairing him with rapper Dace Loaf, which seemed like an attempt to move Durk away from the gritty drill style. Also, King Little J, who was also seen as the biggest rapper out of the GD side, had a lot of potential as an MC, but he would get wrapped up in a murder case that would see him get sent to prison for a number of years. The situation was that King Little J, FBG Butta, 3 other women, and a man named Philman Razine went to buy some weed, and the meeting turned tense as an argument ensued, and this would lead to Philman shooting the man 4 times, but the man had a gun on him too and shot Philman back, which resulted in his death. Even if Lil J didn't shoot anyone during this incident, he was still wrapped up in the case and ultimately got charged with conspiracy to commit murder, intent to kill, and injure. He got out on parole in 2022, but he got caught with a gun later that year and was sent back to prison. All these factors led to public interest in drill music seeing a major decline, but I'd like to add that G Herbo was still dropping music and mixtapes regularly, and he was even featured on the 2016 XXL list that many look back on fondly. Lil Bibby, however, decided to step away from music as he saw the money was really in developing artists and owning a label, which he did in 2017 with the creation of Grade A Productions, which would see major success in the later part of the 2010s. The decline of drill music would coincide with the rise of another movement. Interest would pivot more towards the vibrant, creative, and free style that would become known as SoundCloud rap that would begin to blow up in 2016. Many of these artists were directly influenced by drill rappers, especially in their more minimalist rapping style and more focused on overall vibe and energy of the song as opposed to lyrical skill. Also, in the first wave of the early SoundCloud era, gangsta rap was still a presence, but these street raps were often paired with more wavy or psychedelic cloud rap beats, with rappers talking about robbing people and finessing as a means to get money and look fly. Later in the SoundCloud wave, rappers like Comethazine and YBN Namir would pair drill imagery and gangster rap with these cloud rap beats, with this formula proving to be successful. But while the SoundCloud era was in full swing, and a whole new generation of rappers influenced by drill's minimalist style were making serious moves in the hip-hop industry, there was an up-and-coming rapper in the Chicago drill scene who would really start to make waves, but his story highlights the hopelessness of gang life and the tragic circumstances that lead lost youth to this lifestyle. It was around this time his story was coming to a violent end. Of course, I'm talking about the story of ShootaShellz.
I see your rapping ass don't wanna shoot. To get to you, I see I had to step up.
ShootaShellz was a rapper from the east side of Chicago and was from the set Black Mob, which are a set of renegade black P-Stones. Black Mob would mostly beef with NLMB, or No Limit Muskegon Boys, and other sets from the east side of Chicago. NLMB is notable as this is the same set where G Herbo, Lil Bibby, and GBE Capo are from, and basically they had beef with the entire east side. Anyways, even in some of G Herbo's earliest songs, he would throw shots at ShootaShellz with lines like, "When I see Shooter, I'ma blam the 8," in the song I'm a Boss freestyle, and he would also diss him as well as his set Black Mob in the song In My Hood, where he rapped, "Black Mob ain't on shit, don't tell Shooter we name changing," which is a reference to Hoods changing their name after key members pass away. But even though these were disses very early on in Lil Herb's career, ShootaShellz would reply a number of years later. He would explain in an interview with Zach TV that he did respond back to Lil Herb when he first dissed him, but he was just playing around with rapping, not taking it too seriously, and also explained that the song didn't get much traction. He would further explain this in a separate interview by saying, quote,
like, when he first started rapping or whatever, you feel me, when motherfuckers was just local, he had mentioned my name in the track. This one, I wasn't even really rapping like that. Everybody always play around with the music, but you feel me, I wasn't taking that shit too serious. You feel me, motherfucker put me up on game. This around the time I ended up getting shot like 2011. It was like around that time, like 2011, 2012. He put that, it was to that, not that y'all don't really, but the I'm a boss shit. You feel me, he said some shit about me or whatever. And then, I was rapping, you feel me, but, funds weren't looking too good, you feel me? I didn't really have too many connections as far as the videos, the studios, or instrumentals or whatever. But of course I was it's rap beef. Once a motherfucker mention my name, we go at it, you feel me? Because, we really into it. It ain't like this just some odd motherfucker I never heard of. This motherfucker, we into it, you feel me? So I mentioned them back, but it ain't really getting no recognition, you feel me? So, yeah.
But prison is inevitable in his lifestyle, so he would serve some time in jail. But once getting released around mid-2016, Shooter really started to take rapping seriously and drop more music pretty often. He would drop songs like Mobsters, Pac-Man, Massacre, and Real Ones, which showed his potential as a rapper this early on. But the more he dropped, the more you would see him starting to come into his own as an artist. These early songs didn't do much for him in the rap game, but things would start to change once he decided to diss G Herbo back for his disses back in 2011 by dropping the song Death of 150. Death of 150 is considered one of the most disrespectful songs in drill history, as this song sees him relentlessly dissing NLMB and several of their dead members, with some of the people he dissed being murders that Shooter himself is heavily rumored to have direct involvement in. He wasn't just disrespectful in this song, as he proved himself to have genuine skills on the mic, with his tight flow and the way he paired words together, which is more reminiscent of lyrical rappers. That was refreshing, as his style of rapping included a lot of multi-syllable rhymes. Many at this time thought he was just clout chasing and trying to make a name off of a more famous rapper, but he would clear this up also in his interview with Zach TV, as he explained that their beef goes back to middle school when his group of friends and theirs would have big fights that would escalate further as they got older. He would explain this in deeper detail in a separate interview in 2017, where he would express that once it turns into bloodshed and death, there basically isn't going back. In his own words, he would say, quote,
"You think it's like any way that situation can be solved?"
No, I don't know, man. It been too much going on, you feel me? It been too much going on. That shit have never got down. A lot of shit with the Lil Herb shit. It wasn't even just Lil Herb, though, you feel me? He used to go to a whole nother, when I was, in 6th grade, I used to go to PAL, you feel me? And then we used to be, elementary schools, close by elementary schools used to fight, you feel me? We've been always in tour with them. And as we got older, you feel me, the shit just escalated, you feel me? So, motherfuckers started gang banging, fist fights turned into gunshots, you feel me, gunplay. And he just so happened to be a part of them, you feel me? So that's how it came about. It don't never be about no money, though. The shit wasn't really about no money, you feel me? Just motherfuckers always fighting, bad blood, and then as we got older, high school, and then motherfuckers started playing with guns, people started dying, or somebody got shot, and ain't nobody gonna let that shit go, you feel me? So once a motherfucker get hit, blood shit, the shit, it'll never be the same.
Death of 150 would do a lot for the career of ShootaShellz due to his disrespectful nature and his ability to blend words together with a great amount of lyrical skill. This was reflected in him doing more interviews and starting to gain a following as a rapper. But a lot of the reason why this track did so well was due to the relentless dissing. You could hear the anger and pain in his voice, especially in the end, where he just stops the music and disses multiple members of NLMB, both dead and alive. But more eyes were on him and his music, and this would be a double-edged sword, as we've seen multiple times in drill by this point. A song this disrespectful makes you a target. This would even be seen when Shooter himself was saying in one of these interviews that fans of G Herbo would DM him on Instagram telling him that he's gonna die and, quote, be the next Pac, which just shows the warped perception that many drill fans have when it comes to their favorite rappers and their ops. But that's something I'll get into more a little later. But in spite of his skills and potential as a rapper, he was knee-deep in the streets. The ops already wanted him bad for all the alleged dirt he did in the streets, but this song just made them want him more, and about 3 months later, he would be killed in what many would consider one of the most brutal deaths in Chicago. According to the Chicago Tribune, ShootaShellz, real name Sandrone Doles, was about to get into his car in the Auburn Gresham community when 3 men exited a white Nissan Altima and opened fire. He was struck multiple times, and according to other reports, the 3 shooters stood over him. And, well, I don't really want to get into what happened next, but you could fill in the blanks. The story of ShootaShellz is one that highlights the dark and tragic nature of kids being sucked into the gang life before they really know what comes with that. While some people get into it because they think it looks cool, others get into it for survival in a rough environment, and Cedrone got into it for that reason. He has a song out there called Price of the Streets, which is a song where he essentially tells his life story and everything that got him to the point he was at right before getting killed, showing a great amount of introspection in this track. It's one of the most transparent songs I've ever heard about life in the streets. He would express that being in school, he would look at other kids and see they haven't lost much, which is referring to him losing both of his parents within a year, his father at the age of 9 and his mother at the age of 11. As a result, him and his older brother, known as Scoobs, would sleep at various friends' houses, and when they couldn't find a place to stay, they would sleep in abandoned buildings, which is something he rapped about in this track too. He would go on to rap in this song that he became a Black P Stone because of his brother, and when he chose his life, he really didn't know what it came with. He just wanted to have fun with his friends, doing dumb stuff that we all do as kids. But soon, as we'll get into a little later, a lot of people on the outside judge these kids for getting into this lifestyle and joining gangs. But when you look at a story like this one, how do you expect a child to really know the world he's stepping into when joining a gang? Especially when he was essentially orphaned at the age of 11. But as he got older, he would get deeper in the streets, as at the age of 17, in the summer of 2013, he would allegedly kill 3 of his rivals, with one being Pistol Pete, who G Herbo would name a mixtape after in 2014. Also, while he was locked up in 2014, his older brother Scoobs would be killed. So by the age of 19, a young Cedrone would essentially lose most of his family, and this would see him being further consumed by the revenge that comes with gang life in Chicago. It's heavily rumored that ShootaShellz was killed in such a brutal way because that's what he did when he eventually caught his brother's killer, a 19-year-old named Yogi from the gang ABK. Cedrone was a man who lost a lot at an early age and got lost in the streets with his mind being consumed with revenge, with him even rapping in the song Real Ones, quote, "My count alone I got a whole nick," which refers to the worth of a nickel being 5. The story of ShootaShellz shows just how tragedy and dysfunction at an early age could see kids drawn to the gang lifestyle, being consumed with revenge and losing yourself in that pursuit. When I listen to Death of 150, I hear a young man with nothing to lose. He would rap in the song Price of the Streets, "If I ever had a heart, then that bitch gone."
Try to play me like a pussy nigga and it won't work. Trouble with the stock, it's gon' kick.
After about 2015, overall interest in drill music began to decline, as many of the key figures in the early drill movement were faced with the real-life consequences of the streets before they could truly make it out, with them either getting decades in prison for various crimes or tragically being killed. In spite of this, the influence of drill was still being felt, as there were many regional drill scenes in the United States and across the globe that were in the early stages of its development that would begin to rise to prominence a few years down the line. But with the rise of what many would coin as SoundCloud rap, most rappers opted to not rap about the streets, instead rapping over these spacey and psychedelic beats about drugs or even depression. Some rappers during this era did rap about street activity, but as we discussed before, they would mostly talk about running in houses or finessing as a means of getting money. You even saw rappers like YBN Namir, who wasn't even involved in the lifestyle, rapping about gangs and street life in his early music. I will say, his early songs did show promise, but he was rapping about a life he wasn't living, which would come back to bite him in the ass later in his career. But you would even see the rise of the clout goblin that was 6ix9ine, as he would basically use his gang affiliation with the 9 Trey Bloods as a marketing strategy to get on as a rapper, as well as protection, as he was in a number of high-profile rap beefs and would always go on and on about people testing as Gangsta. But real quick, as a New Yorker myself, I'm sorry we let 6ix9ine happen. But anyways, he would later see the real life consequences of becoming affiliated as a means of getting on in hip hop, as he was wrapped up in a huge indictment with him turning government's witness in the case. You could see how 6ix9ine using gang imagery and aesthetics had already been proven successful by the early drill movement as a means to get more eyes and ears on your music, but he did so in a way that almost proved life-threatening to his safety. But while drill overall wasn't seeing the same level of attention, there were rappers who would directly use the crimes and infamy surrounding their name to create a buzz for themselves in hip-hop, and this would lead us to the case of TK. TK's story highlights how some kids get into the streets as a means of survival and desperation, stepping into a lifestyle at an age where it really hasn't set in what the potential life-changing consequences truly are. TK's story is a tragic one, as he essentially never had a chance, as both of his parents were Crips and his father got locked up when he was a small child. According to TK's sister, while they were living in Las Vegas, their mother would lose custody of her children, causing TK and his sister to be bouncing around multiple foster homes as young children until their father got released from prison when they were about 12 to 13 years old. Then he would get custody of them. But according to his older sister, she would explain that his father would, let's just say, discipline the two of them with a heavy hand, but his sister did admit in an interview with Say Cheese that they did have behavioral issues that may have been rooted in their unstable home life. But she would express that their father did try, but his methods were not the best, as the two of them were basically a. But during TK's second murder trial, his sister would give a harrowing testimony where she would describe the abuse that they endured as children in great detail that was just honestly pretty hard to watch. The abuse faced by them would cause TK and his sister to run away, as they ran away together and had a plan to stay with their mother in Las Vegas, but she was living out of a motel at this time and soon kicked the kids out as well. This would force the two of them into survival mode, as they were essentially homeless. His sister was about 2 years older than him, so she had a job and was working towards getting an apartment for the two of them. During this time, however, TK was couch surfing, staying with various friends, but he started getting involved with criminal activity as a means to support himself while being a child runaway. But as we all know, once you become a participant in crime, things would begin to escalate quickly. And the nature of his crimes would begin to grow, because as we all know, committing robberies comes with high risk and oftentimes fatal consequences. But during this time, TK and a few of his friends would start rapping, and they would immerse themselves in the dream of one day making it in hip-hop. Some of TK's favorite rappers were Chief Keef, Young Pappy, and Soulja Boy. The group would call themselves the Daytona Boys, with the other members being friends of his, Santana Sage and Pimpy Z. They started playing shows and parties in their local area, creating a buzz for themselves in the Arlington rap scene. However, things would come to an end for Daytona Boys, as after a show they played on New Year's, TK was a witness to a murder as the people he was in a car with and passengers of another vehicle got into an argument, and Santana Sage would shoot at the car, hitting 20-year-old University of North Texas student Sarah Munchlinker in the head, killing her. Santana Sage, real name Eric Johnson, was actually a Marine, which gave the story a lot more coverage in the local media, but he was eventually convicted of this murder and is serving a 44-year sentence. TK and Pimpy Z were not charged in the case, but in spite of narrowly escaping jail, the two of them would not slow down with their street activity. 7 months after this incident, TK, Pimpy Z, and 4 others were involved in a robbery gone wrong, which resulted in the death of Ethan Walker. TK was not the person who pulled the trigger, and in fact, he didn't even have a gun on him at the time. But since it was this robbery that led to the death of a 21-year-old Ethan Walker, all the participants involved were charged with capital murder. TK was only 16 at the time, and Pimpy Z was 17, so the two of them would be on house arrest while awaiting trial. According to TK's sister, his friends knew his talent and potential as a rapper, so they would support him by bringing TK recording equipment that he could use to continue to make music in the meantime. But infamously, on March 26, 2017, TK and Pimpy Z would decide to go on the run, with TK tweeting, quote, "Fuck this house arrest shit, fuck 12. They gonna have to catch me on Hood." We may never know what caused TK to decide to take his chances and go on the run. Maybe it was the uncertainty of the case, or him being on house arrest that was getting to him. But during this time, TK did have a buzz, but he was still very much an underground rapper. TK was moving crazy and recklessly during this time, as he was being spotted by fans at the mall and even getting spotted at fast food restaurants. But on April 23rd, 2017, while on the run, TK and Pappy Z set up a photographer named Mark Anthony Saldivar to be robbed, as they were running out of money at this time. Mark met up with the pair and what he thought would be an opportunity to take pictures of these buzzing and up-and-coming rappers, but once he went in the car, they pulled out their guns and attempted to take everything he had. But things would not go to plan yet again, as according to TK's ex-girlfriend's testimony, Mark refused to give up his backpack, so the pair would begin to hit him and push him out of the car. After this, Mark began to scream for help, climbing on top of the car, and began to kick on the windshield. This was when TK leaned out of the car and shot Mark Anthony Saldivar, killing him at just the age of 21 years old. Apparently after this, Pappy Z even gave TK props for catching his first body. But also in May of that year, TK would allegedly attack and rob a 65-year-old man, beating him unconscious and taking his wallet. But while on the run, he would still find time to write and record. And this was when he decided to make a song, bluntly rapping about the predicament he found himself in. And he would call this song The Race. He dropped it on SoundCloud on June 16, 2017, on his 17th birthday. He could have seen this as a last-ditch effort to get his music in front of as many eyes as possible before the walls closed around him, as it was clear that TK would be going away for a long time. But at the time, there was a music video in the vault not yet released. Many don't know this, but while on the run, TK would even appear at shows in different parts of the country. I know this because a few friends of mine from high school actually played a show in what I think was either the city or New Jersey. But either way, TK was there. But from what I remember, I don't think he was advertised on the flyer. But something happened where I think the show got shut down or something and everybody was outside. And this is where he gave his only performance of The Race. It could have been him still committing crimes and moving recklessly like this while on the run that got him caught, but he was eventually captured by the authorities in Elizabeth, New Jersey on June 30th, 2017. But the next day, his music video for the song The Race was uploaded onto the Buffet Boys YouTube channel, where the song would immediately go viral. It was one of those songs where even if you wanted to, you couldn't look away. Here was this kid who was still baby-faced, rapping about being on the run, catching bodies, and robbing people over this earworm of a beat. In the video, there are just a bunch of kids playing with guns, and it's just such a surreal sight. TK's idea of marketing his time on the run worked, as in the summer of 2017, this song was just everywhere, with a bunch of rappers like YBN Namir, Lil Yachty, Isaiah Rashad, and Rico Nasty, among others, dropping their own remixes of the song. The Race would go on to peak at number 44 on the Billboard Top 100 singles charts, and has over 250 million views on YouTube. He will go on to release the Santana World mixtape in July of that year, and in a move that many criticized, he will go on to sign with 88 Classic Records, which is a subsidiary of RCA. Many criticized this move as they saw the label as jumping at the chance to profit not only off of the death of multiple people, but off of a child who was in serious life-altering trouble. And we now know that TK will spend most of his life incarcerated. The story of TK not only highlights the circumstances that seemingly forces a child into a life of crime and thus sees them being handed decades in jail as a young adult, but it shows how even the people participating in this dysfunction know that if they could somehow sell this back to the public, they could make something for themselves, even if it's only for a few months. TK deep down must have understood the allure of his predicament, as he smartly rapped about being on the run, smoking a blunt in front of his wanted poster, and thus putting his name out there on a worldwide scale in the process. Basically knowing that he was going away for a long time, so might as well make sure his music is out there to as many people as possible, and make some money out of it. He made it as a rapper off of the real life crimes he committed, but he was in too deep in the streets to be able to do anything about this newfound fame. I can't even imagine how it must have felt to be in this much of a hopeless situation. In the process of going viral, however, many saw The Race as TK dancing on the graves of his victims while instigating the cops and making a mockery out of authorities, likening the music video to a catch me if you can type of scenario. But as hefty sentences were given to his co-defendants in the years following the rise of The Race, it was clear that things were not looking good. TK TK's best friend was even given a 30-year sentence after being offered 20 in exchange for snitching on Tamor, but refusing to do so. The notoriety of the race and many people within the hip-hop industry calling for his freedom made prosecutors turn their focus to TK. In spite of him not pulling the trigger in this situation or even playing a significant role in the robbery. But he was eventually sentenced to 55 years for the murder, being eligible for parole after serving 28 years. But just recently, he was found guilty of the April 2017 murder of Mark Anthony Saldivar and was given an 80-year sentence. Also, quick side note, I want to point out how now TK is seen as a pioneering YN, or even king of the YNs, which I'll go deeper into during my analysis of drill, and how it feeds into the morbid curiosity of death, murder, and dysfunction. But I really can't get over that, like pioneering YN. Ah man, but anyways, TK's story shows just how drawn the public is to real life stories of crime and murder, to the point that it'll boost the popularity of a teenage rapper engaging in this behavior. It's obvious that TK could have made it, as he had the skill and charisma on the mic to do so, but at just 16 years old, he was too deep in the streets, costing him his freedom, but he marketed his crimes in a way that resulted in the legendary song that was The Race, where he is now remembered for his wasted potential. But only a couple of years after The Race was released, you would see yet another example of a rapper's crimes boosting their popularity. Of course, I'm talking about the alleged crimes apparently committed by YNW Melly, as the infamy behind him acted as a launching pad to take Melly's career to the next level. YNW Melly is a rapper from Florida who is affiliated with the Bloods from that area. He was drawn to the streets at an early age. He started to drop music around 2016, and aside from some periods of incarceration, he was pretty consistent with dropping music. But being involved in street activity and carrying guns on him, he would get in trouble with the law at an early age, as he was involved in a school shooting where 3 people were injured, and he would serve a year in jail for this crime. But during this time while incarcerated, he would focus on writing more music, and by the time 2017 rolled around, his name was starting to buzz, with him dropping the Collect Call EP in December of that year. But in 2018, things would continue to build for YNW Melly, as he dropped the songs Blue Balenciagas, Melly the Menace, and the infamous Murder on My Mind, which would all end up getting millions of views on YouTube. It was clear that Melly had the talent, as he had a unique style of pairing his gritty lyrics about street life with a more melodic rap style, as he was heavily influenced by Chris Brown and Michael Jackson, among others. He even had the same manager as King Von, where the two would become cool with each other. The early attention of Murder on My Mind would catch the attention of the 300 record label, where he would sign a deal, and soon he dropped his debut mixtape titled I Am You, and things would continue to build for him. He would even drop a collaboration in January of 2019 with Kanye West with their song Mixed Personalities, which was just an insanely catchy song with this earworm of a chorus. I also want to note that he did speak openly about having dissociative identity disorder, or split personality disorder, where he had 2 distinct personalities, with Melvin being the violent side of his personality and Melly being the happy and loving side. Melly was hitting new heights as a rapper and achieving milestones that most artists could only dream of. But while making moves in the industry and furthering his career, on February 13, 2019, YNW Melly was charged with the murders of 2 of his best friends from an incident that happened back in October of 2018, where fellow YNW members 19-year-old Christopher Thomas, aka YNW Juvie, and 21-year-old Anthony Williams, aka YNW Sack Chaser, were murdered. The prosecution alleges that Melly made it look like a drive-by shooting, while forensics may indicate that the shots were fired from inside of the car. This case has seen many complications, as it took over 4 years for this trial to even begin. But after a trial that lasted a little over a week, the jury could not come up with a unanimous decision, so the judge declared this a mistrial, with the jury expected to make a clear decision later this year. There's plenty of other videos that covered his story and case in a lot more depth, but I wanted to touch upon this story because after it became worldwide news that this up-and-coming rapper was charged with killing 2 of his close friends that were even in his crew, the news coverage brought a whole new audience to YNW Melly's music, and his popularity strangely exploded, specifically his song On My Mind. Murder on My Mind is a truly captivating song that Melly wrote while he was in jail at just 16 years old, where he sings openly about his homicidal ideations and even gives a detailed description of a hypothetical homicide he committed. Many in the public believe that this song was a confession of the 2018 murder, and this fueled even more intrigue surrounding the song. Even if this wasn't a confession, people were still fascinated at the fact that he was rapping about having homicidal ideations, and a year later, he may have done that exact thing. This became his breakout song, becoming a full-blown hit as it peaked at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles charts. We all know that negativity and controversy sells. This isn't anything new, even in our rage bait attention economy that we find ourselves in. Snoop Dogg was already on hits like Nothing But a G Thing with Dr. Dre in 1992, but when he and his bodyguard were charged with first-degree murder in 1993 of a man who was allegedly a rival gang member, this grew Snoop Dogg's audience to a whole new level, as it was perceived by audiences that all the gangsta stuff he was rapping about, he really lived. It gave his music more publicity and added to his gangster persona. This was the exact dynamic in play with the case of YNW Melly, and exactly why his music blew up even more after his name was tied to this horrific case. But the raw talent he possessed helped, as fans who learned about him through this case ended up loving his music. But over 6 years later, YNW Melly is still incarcerated, as his fate is still at the hands of the courts, with many wanting to know what will happen to YNW Melly. The cases of TK and YNW Melly provide a look as to the dynamic that's at play with the rise of drill music, and why the public are so drawn to these figures who have brutal crimes attached to their names, which I'll explore more in a little bit. But in the late 2010s, drill scenes all over the world would start to develop and come into their own, with the Chicago drill scene being the focal point in all of this, seeing a major resurgence.
Hold me down, smoking that. I'm tired of smelling Tuka in Lamar, and I'm tired of scrap. I'm thinking.
During the late 2010s, when SoundCloud rap was completely unavoidable, taking over hip-hop, several drill scenes were bubbling under the surface, seeing major developments, but didn't quite yet have their mainstream moment. You had the drill scene in Jacksonville, Florida, where there was just an unfathomable amount of bloodshed and deaths on both sides of the gang war in that area, but this was of course reflected in the music. The two biggest rappers to come out of Jacksonville drill were Young and Ace from ATK, also known as Aim to Kill or Ace's Top Killers, who had more of a melodic take on drill while still making disrespectful music, and there was also Julio Fulio from the 6 Block set of KTA or Kill Them All, who was also making drill bangers with disrespectful lyrics. But in spite of their songs getting millions of views in 2018 and 2019, they had yet to have their big mainstream moment, but that would come a few years down the line. But also in the late 2010s, Brooklyn drill was really beginning to come into its own, as by 2015, there were early pioneers of the genre like Bambino, Curly Sav, and Polo Rel, but during 2016, rappers like 22G's were seeing a lot more emotion, getting millions of views on his videos. He is seen as a pioneer in the genre, as he was one of the first rappers from New York to rap over UK drill beats. He was from the Blickies, which are gangster disciples, and their rivals tried their hand at rapping as well, but weren't getting the same type of attention that 22G's was at the time. Then Chef G decided to start rapping, and soon after this, he would see major buzz in the area after dropping a diss to 22G's and the Blickies titled No Suburban, which was a play on 22G's song Suburban. The song was massive in the city and saw the GD's rivals in New York, the Crips, getting major attention in the drill scene. And eventually more rappers from both sides started to rap, like Nas Blicky, PNB Sav, Sleepy Hollow, and later rappers like 504 and Pop Smoke would make major waves a few years down the line. However, I like to mention that this was the time when you started to see just how regional drill was, as their scenes would really exist in their own bubble, unless they had big breakthrough moments, which these drill scenes would go on to have in the following years. It's crazy how you could have millions of views on your video and still be relatively unknown, but that harkens to a bigger theme of social media, the death of collective conscience, and homogenous culture. But I'm getting too ahead of myself. That's a topic for a whole nother video. Anyways, as these regional drill scenes began to come into its own, with them having their own unique game politics, wars, and an unimaginable amount of death chronicled by YouTubers, Chicago drill was seeing a major resurgence with FBG Duck finally breaking through, and the rise of a rapper who had become infamous in drill and whose influence is still being seen today. Of course, I'm talking about King Von. So in spite of many of the GD rappers in Chicago not getting much industry attention, many of them, especially FBG Duck, would still drop music and videos consistently, really grinding to get his music out there. It was clear that Duck wanted this and would persevere in spite of all the odds that were seemingly stacked against him and his side. But in order to get a full understanding of drill's resurgence, I need to give you guys a bit of context. It's crazy to even talk about it in these terms, but in the late 2010s, the war with STL/EBT and O Block in the south side of Chicago would see a major escalation when O Block member T-Roy was killed by TB from Taekwon World in February of 2017. And for those who don't know, Taekwon World is a gang that's closely allied with STL/EBT. T-Roy was a loved member of O Block who was close to key figures like Fredo Santana, Chief Keef, Lil Durk, and Lil Reese. So this would cause a few members of O Block, including T-Roy's little brother HK, to start Get Back Gang, which its sole purpose was to get revenge for T-Roy, and they did this with full force, unfortunately killing several members of STL/EBT and members of allied gangs in the summer of 2017, which included FBG Duck's older brother, FBG Brick, and his cousin, Kobe Mack, on July 17, 2017. There was even harrowing pictures of Duck, his mother, and other family members embracing during the aftermath of the shooting. It's said that FBG Duck's mother urged him not to get revenge in the streets, but instead encouraged him to put all of his energy into his music, and that's exactly what he did. In the months following the death of his older brother, FBG Duck would drop banger after banger, creating hype around not only his name, but the whole FBG crew. He was slowly building up hype for himself, in spite of the major loss of his older brother, as his videos were getting millions of views on YouTube once again. But notably, in November 2017, around the time that FBG Duck would drop his song titled Gang Anthem, O Block member King Von would be released from prison as he was acquitted for the charges of first-degree murder and 2 attempted murders on a technicality. But it would take some time before King Von made his way as a rapper, helping to revitalize the drill genre as a whole. But while FBG Duck was building up his buzz, a good friend of his from STL/EBT would try his hand at rapping. Of course, I'm talking about FBG Wooski, and he would drop his remix for the song Computers in January of 2018. Computers is seen as one of the most disrespectful songs in drill history, as he dissed well over a dozen dead gang members from his rival sets, as well as dissing all the gangs that rivaled his own. He would even throw shots at the CPD as well. But what made this song hit as hard as it did was the fact that the rappers from FBG were not nearly as disrespectful with the disses and strayed away from dissing the dead, as they knew what that came with, which made this song hit a lot harder to drill fans, as seen in comments like "When you get tired of everybody smoking on Tuka," among others. It was clear that Wooski had a lot of potential, as he had a very distinct voice as a rapper and even a more lyrical style, which included his uses of multi-syllable rhyme schemes, which was a combination that made him stand out. But he was not as focused on rapping as Duck was, as it was clear that Wooski had one foot in, one foot out, which is a dynamic that plagues a good chunk of drill rappers. Things were really building for them as a whole, but the industry would finally take notice when FBG Duck would drop the song Slide 2 weeks later. This song was a massive hit and one of the first drill songs to get major mainstream attention in a number of years. This was a huge moment for the FBG crew, as Duck was a part of the drill scene since the beginning, and in spite of taking personal losses in the streets, he kept staying consistent with music, and it finally paid off. This was in part due to the fact that Duck started out the song with a more deadpan, quiet, and borderline whisper style flow, and when the beat kicked in, he would pick up that energy and switched up his flow, which people online, including DJ Vlad, were quick to point out. But overall, this song did a lot for their side, as for a number of years, they may have had the views and hype surrounding their name, but this wasn't enough to get the music industry on board. This would cause fans to presume that the GDs were blackballed, which is a sentiment still held to this day, as fans couldn't understand how Duck, King Little J, and Billionaire Black would get millions of views on their videos, but were never picked up by a label. But in my eyes, I don't feel that they were necessarily blackballed. I just feel like the other side got there first, and the gatekeepers really wanted to prevent a gang war from making its way into the music industry. Anyways, Slide was the song that finally made the hip-hop industry take notice of Duck and the rest of the FBG crew, with 21 Savage even hopping on the remix a few months later, and Duck would get signed shortly after to Sony Records. But while FBG Duck was finally making industry moves and truly making it as a rapper, Lil Durk would find his career was in an upward trajectory after parting ways with Def Jam in March of 2018. It was clear that Def Jam didn't really know how to utilize Lil Durk, so his career was somewhat in limbo for a number of years, as he was still making moves as a rapper, but not seeing the numbers or hype surrounding his name like he did back in the early 2010s. Once his contractual obligations were over, he would start to move his career in the direction that he saw fit, as he was now a free agent. After this, he would drop his Just Cause Y'all Waited mixtape later that month, which was a big success for him. He would also bring new rappers onto his OTF record label, which included King Von. Now, King Von was someone who had a fierce reputation in the streets of Chicago, as it is now well known through several YouTube documentaries that his name has been tied to over 7 murders, with more on top of that if you include other murders that he had a direct part in. Anyways, according to King Von himself, him and Lil Durk had been friends since about the 6th or 7th grade, with their bond continuing as Lil Durk's star began to rise in the early drill wave, as Lil Durk even let King Von wear one of his expensive watches to prom, with King Von even letting off shots that night, but plenty of documentaries have covered that too. I bring all this up to show just how deep their bond went and how far back they've been friends, as in fact, Lil Durk would be the one who helped King Von out during his murder case, paying for his lawyers. But also, Lil Durk was keenly aware that audiences would be drawn to a drill rapper who not only lived what he rapped about, but had the, I guess, street cred to back up what he was rapping about, with many till this day considering King Von to be the realest gangster or drill rapper to ever come out of hip-hop. King Von's career in rap would really start to take shape when he dropped his first song called Beat That Body with Bezu from THF, or Trigger Happy Family, in October of 2018. THF Bezu also notably beat a murder that happened all the way back in 2009. But this song was actually pretty good, but you could tell that King Von was still green as a rapper and didn't really come into his own just yet. But since he had the backing of Lil Durk, who was slowly becoming one of the biggest rappers in hip-hop, he had time to hone his craft. Von would stay consistent with dropping music in late 2018, dropping songs like Problems and War With Us, but notably, this early on in his career, his songs were littered with disses, especially to his dead enemies. During the time that King Von was just starting out as a rapper, FBG Wooski was still very much in the streets and only dropped a handful of songs after the success of his Computer's remix. It was clear that he had star potential, but music wasn't really his focus, and FBG Wooski was still very much in the streets. And later that month, on October 9th, 2018, Dusky the Man from MOB was killed, and he was at the time the most popular rapper from that set. Him and Wooski even had songs together, but shockingly, at Dusky's funeral, about a week and a half later, 6 people were shot, including Wooski, who had the most serious injury with a shot to the head, and he was in critical condition, but miraculously, he was able to survive this shooting. Although he has some lingering side effects and some brain damage from this shooting, it's a blessing that he's still alive. In the years following this incident, his focus would understandably shift away from rapping in the streets, but he would be the subject of heavy dissing from his ops, especially King Von. But drill fans still debate who was responsible for the shooting, with most people pointing to either O Block or the Gang 800, who are also rivals at STL/EBT. But for King Von, things would really begin to change, as in December 2018, he would drop one of his biggest songs called Crazy Story. Crazy Story helped to set Von apart from other rappers in drill, as this was an energetic storytelling song about King Von getting the drop on one of his ops and going on a drill, seemingly pulling from real life experiences of his. The tight yet simple flow mixed with the engaging story helped to show the wider hip hop world that King Von was up next in the rap game, and made them take notice of this up and coming rapper who was closely associated with Lil Durk, who by this point kept on pushing with rebuilding his career. But the people who kept track of Chicago's gang underworld, aka Chiracologists, were already deeply familiar with King Von's history and reputation, being surprised that he was now making these moves in the industry. But during the start of 2019, things would really start to heat up between both sides, but not in the streets, this time in the booth. In January of 2019, Mimo 600 and King Von would drop the song Exposing Me, where both rappers would pay homage to their friends who were killed, and King Von also paid homage to his father, who was also a BD, who was killed back in 2005 when King Von was about 11 years old, highlighting how oftentimes kids are influenced by family members to join gangs when they are older, which we'll dive deep into shortly. But in Exposing Me, King Von and Mimo would diss dead rivals heavily, with Von dissing Wooski for getting shot in the head, and the two also dissing people like Tuka, Lil Mark, and FBG Duck's cousin Scrap from MOB, who was killed back in 2014. The amount of disrespect in Exposing Me, paired with FBG Duck being signed and making moves in the hip-hop industry, would see Duck respond directly with his own remix to Exposing Me, rapping over the same beat with his cousin, Ruga, who was also the brother of Scrap. In their song, they arguably took the disrespect even further, as they dissed at least a dozen dead members from O Block and 600, sometimes just listing off members who died in this war. But many fans see this song as one of the best songs in drill, as lyrically theirs is a step up, as the both of them trade bars back and forth with an effortless flow, especially some lines that Ruga spits, one including a reference to online speculation as to who was responsible for the murder of O.D. Perry back in 2011, with him saying that they don't even know who made the O, referencing these debates going on online. But things wouldn't go further in this back and forth, as both camps would continue to build, as King Von dropped Crazy Story 2.0 with Lil Durk, which propelled his career even more, as Crazy Story 2.0 became his biggest song up until that point. Also, Durk absolutely killed his verse too, but this remix put a lot more eyes on Von, as it was clear he was up next. But while King Von was coming into his own as a rapper and reaching new heights in his career as his lyrics backed up what he lived, it seemed that Von may not have been the best influence on Lil Durk, as in May of 2019, the two were arrested in connection with a shooting and robbery that occurred back in February of that year, with King Von and Durk both being arrested but then released on bond. Now, many other documentaries covered this incident in great detail already, but this arrest in the eyes of fans showed that Von wasn't the best influence on Durk, as he was already away from the street life in Chicago and in the music industry for a number of years already. So it came as a shock to fans that Durk was even involved in a crime like this. But both FBG Duck and King Von will continue to drop consistently, with Von dropping his Grandson Volume 1 mixtape in September 2019. But a few months later, in December 2019, Duck would try something different when he dropped his song Chicago Legends, which is a song where Duck would pay homage to many fallen Chicago rappers and other key figures that had passed away on both sides, including OTF Newski, Fredo Santana, Ellie Capone, Lil Jojo, Lil Mark, Young Pappy, and the YouTuber Zach TV, among others. This song took the drill world by surprise, as this was the first time that a drill rapper made any type of positive acknowledgement of rappers from the other side. It got a lot of love across the city, with some people thinking that this would be the beginning of peace between both sides, but Von wasn't having any of it. See, Von was a real killer from his side, and that separated him from other drill rappers. He really hated his ops for killing his friends, and he made sure to keep dissing them relentlessly in his verses. He dissed them on his personal Twitter daily as a teen, and what he was doing with his music was simply dissing them and making them look weak, except on a way bigger scale. As Von said in his song Back Again, quote, "We into it until you die." But I want to say what FBG Duck did by releasing Chicago Legends took a lot of guts, and it's a move that's still looked at positively by fans all these years later. It was clear that after the Exposing Me remix that Duck wasn't concerned with the beef or dissing and just wanted to make quality music and take care of his family. King Von really didn't care about any of that and was making a name for himself for his undeniable skills once he started to come into his own as a rapper. But what drew audiences to drill is the relentless dissing, and Von was seen as the drill rapper who was really about that life, which added to his appeal, and he was seen as a throwback to the kind of drill rappers that made up the first wave back in 2012. 2 months later, Von would drop one of his biggest songs called Took Her to the O, which was another storytelling song where he would diss FBG Duck heavily, but in a less than subtle way. Basically, he had a lookalike of Duck in the video, where he would allude to Duck's older brother in the song, describing how Duck threw a brick through his car and immersed it or swore it on his brother Brick before throwing the brick. And then in the end of the song, he basically kills this fictional Duck. He would go as far as making the quote, "We Not From 63rd movement" a real thing, which was him basically dissing his ops on a worldwide scale, even making shirts. The infamy surrounding his name and the fact that he really lived what he rapped about helped Von gain more traction as a rapper, as when 2020 rolled around, he wasn't just a top drill rapper, but one of the biggest rappers in hip-hop. But anyone would get tired of this relentless dissing, and FBG Duck decided to clap back with a diss track of his own. This time, he would diss heavily, like on Exposing Me, and on July 10th, 2020, FBG Duck would drop the song Dead Bitches. In this song, he would diss dead members from multiple gangs from O Block and 600, and even saying in the hook that Chicago Legends was just business, and even rapping quote, "We already in hell, bitch, we been demons," and straight up saying F certain dead members in the hook, which included members like T-Roy and O.D. Perry. He would even rap about how Von mentioned his older brother Brick and took her to the O, but as we all know, dissing the dead makes you a huge target, especially in Chicago. And less than a month later, on August 4th, 2020, FBG Duck was murdered in the Gold Coast of Chicago, which is an area known for its high-end shopping district. Many fans assumed that he was killed for dropping the highly disrespectful song titled Dead Bitches, and even early on there was large debates on Reddit discussing what gang was involved, and even discussing which specific people may have pulled the trigger, which saying that out loud really put that in perspective, like drill fans could be crazy sometimes. But eventually it was revealed who were involved in this murder, as the suspects were arrested in 2021, and as the trial began in 2023, we got more details as to what actually happened that day. It was revealed during the trial that Duck was dating the baby mother of a THF-46 member named TZ. Apparently TZ was upset about this, and THF-46 is heavily affiliated with O Block. TZ essentially lied and called up O Block members claiming that Duck tried to kill him, but he didn't have his weapon on him. And this then caused 6 O Block members to race over to the Gold Coast and kill Duck. In spite of these circumstances that didn't have anything to do with the song Dead Bitches, it's said that King Von had a $50K bounty on Duck's head and raised it to $100,000. Even after the death of FBG Duck, King Von would basically go on a victory lap, dissing heavily on Twitter and IG Live. And in a vlog, there's footage of Von having chains made for close friends of his, and some of these people were later arrested for this murder. Many speculate that when the O Block 5 were caught, due to the bounty that was on FBG Duck's head, if King Von was alive, he may have been wrapped up in this and made the head and face of this case, making this a racketeering case or a RICO indictment. But after the death of FBG Duck, fans of drill music would speak on O Block winning the war and stuff like that, which is just crazy to phrase the death of someone in a way like this, but this is what people were saying at the time. After this, King Von will continue to build his career and momentum in the rap game, as he dropped music videos that were getting millions of views, and he was not only seen as a hot and buzzing drill rapper, but one of the biggest rappers in the game as a whole. Throughout the year 2020, he was dropping singles and music videos in preparation for his debut album. This included songs like I Am What I Am, All These People, and Why He Told, which this song caused fans to speculate on which O Block member he was referring to as a snitch. But anyways, the day finally came that King Von would drop his debut album, which was fittingly titled Welcome to O Block, on October 30th, 2020. But at the time it was a huge success, and it debuted at number 13 on the Billboard Top 200. But tragically, just a week later, he would be killed in a separate incident that had nothing to do with all the violence going on back in Chicago. So on the night of November 5th, 2020, King Von was set to have a release party for his album at the Opium nightclub in Atlanta, and the night seemed to be going smoothly as his performance that night went well, and he was out with his inner circle that night. As the night was coming to an end, there were 2 cars driving back towards the Airbnb, where Von's car would take a sudden detour and head towards the Monaco Hookah Lounge. In now leaked security camera footage, you could see Von approaching Quando Rondo, and he began to assault him. Now, Quando was signed to NBA Youngboy's record label, and Von was in a beef with Youngboy, seemingly over women. This has also been discussed at length in multiple other YouTube documentaries, but no one really knows what was going through King Von's head that night or why he decided to fight Quando at that moment. But after the fight ensued, things would quickly escalate as Lil Tim, a close associate of Quando Rondo, would shoot King Von 4 times, and all hell would break loose as members of King Von's entourage would quickly shoot Lil Tim back, standing over him, but their gun would jam. 2 members of King Von's entourage, Slutty and Louie, were shot by off-duty officers in this incident, where Slutty would die and Louie would miraculously survive a headshot, but tragically he would pass away 4 years later, just a few months ago. King Von would later die in hospital. The death of King Von shocked many fans in drill and in the hip-hop world, as Von made it out of the streets and was at the peak of his career, just releasing his debut album and going from strength to strength that year, but one decision would change everything. Some would describe King Von's rap persona as a character, as it was clear he was playing into his reputation as a quote, real shooter and gangsta in his music, while making that the focal point of the music that he made. He was rewarded for this as he quickly became a millionaire from releasing quality storytelling style songs based on his time in the streets, the murders he committed, and how this lifestyle affected him. It seemed that he was incentivized to do so as he kept being rewarded for his authenticity, and that may have affected his decision to fight Quando Rondo that night, as headlines of Von beating up a rival rapper would have been good press and played into his persona as the real deal. But the rise of King Von and him reaching new heights in his career, being the first rapper to openly rap about body counts and murders he was actually a part of, was set an even darker precedent that would influence a whole new generation of rappers and gang members to follow in his footsteps and do the same with disastrous consequences.
He resting in piss, smoking on Melly, got poked in his ribs. Banky died trying to spin with no tent, nigga.
During and after the rise of King Von, you would see other drill scenes begin to have their big mainstream moment where their scenes would start to get a lot more attention and eyes brought to their music. You saw this with the rise of Pop Smoke in 2019 with songs like Welcome to the Party, Dior, Flexin', and Gaddy, getting millions of views and a lot more attention than other rappers who were making music in the Brooklyn drill scene. Pop Smoke's rise was unlike any other, as just within a year of rapping, he was one of the most notable up-and-coming rappers due to his unique style, easily recognizable voice, and overall charisma. But his story was another one that ended in tragedy, as he was killed in a botched robbery in LA after accidentally leaking his location. In Jacksonville, Florida, their drill scene would see a huge boost in popularity in 2021 when Young and Ace, Spinner Benz, Fast Money Goon, and Whopper with the Chopper dropped their song Who I Smoke, which quickly shot up in popularity and became infamous as they paired their grimy lyrics about gang life and murder over a Vanessa Carlton sample that caught everybody's eye. This juxtaposition would see this song being the subject of countless reaction videos, as it was a strange sight seeing these rappers in a golf course just chilling, but when the beat kicked in, everyone knew what the song was about, as in the hook they would just straight up list off members of their rival gang, KTA, who were murdered to provoke their ops. But with King Von becoming one of the biggest rappers in hip-hop off of his skill set mixed with his reputation, Pop Smoke making it out before getting killed, and Young and Ace going viral off of dissing his ops in a way that many would perceive as creative and funny, the floodgates were open and a whole new generation of kids would see their success and attempt to emulate it, with content creators ready to profit off of all this and audiences ready to consume it. But why exactly is this the case? This is what I'm finally going to explain right now. What's going on in drill in our modern era would make what King Von was doing back in 2019 and 2020 look like light work in comparison, and that is not an over-exaggeration. In fact, many people have been quick to point out how all this death and destruction going down mixed with the content being made surrounding it just doesn't feel right. And in fact, it feels kind of gross and exploitative. Now, while I was writing this script, Lil Bill came out with a video of his own dissecting this very phenomenon, specifically looking at the content being made around drill culture and figures like Trap Lord Ross, among others, profiting off of it. Now this is a great video and I recommend that you guys go give it a watch. But in this section, I like to give a different perspective on the matter. When looking at the brief careers of many of the rappers that would make up the various drill scenes around the world, it's clear that something has changed. Just like original gangster rap was the soundtrack to the crack era, drill has become the soundtrack to this modern wasteland that is modern gang politics. That could be summed up as kids being consumed by tit-for-tat revenge killings. Drill over time has become a voice and a vehicle for kids growing up in a gang-filled environment to not only speak on their experiences, but oftentimes provoke and add fuel to the already complex gang wars in their area. Like I said before, each drill scene has their own unique gang politics, but the views and engagement these disrespectful songs being made or receiving motivates others to get in on this trending style of hip-hop, as public interest seems to be increasing as documentaries are getting millions of views on this platform, and there is the rise of what people online are starting to call YNs. It's clear that the money and notoriety that King Von and others like him got influenced others to try to emulate him and repeat his said success. Like, to simplify, let's say there's a kid who's already wrapped up in gangs and everything that comes with that lifestyle, and he sees a rapper not only blowing up rapping about the things he's actually participating in, but making a lot of money doing so. You don't think that'll inspire this kid to do the same thing and try to make it out of his environment by rapping about the behavior he's already engaged in? Now, I don't want to lay blame and simply say, oh, it's the YouTuber's fault or it's the music's fault, as I'm not here to just look for an easy scapegoat, especially since the Crips and the Bloods have been warring since at least the early 70s, multiple generations by now. But I do want to examine the conditions that create these gangs in the first place and the role the content plays in all of this. Because the way things have been going now, things have been getting surreal to say the least. Take the case of the Chicago rapper Bloodhound Lil Jeff, who had a run in hip-hop that only lasted a few months, but his impact is already being felt. Lil Jeff was a rapper from Chicago who by the age of 21 years old allegedly had over 11 bodies to his name, with it being rumored that he and others around him started by doing contract killings out of state in Milwaukee. It's heavily rumored that Lil Jeff took part in a brutal double murder of 2 teenagers outside of their school, 16-year-old Lil Rob, real name Robert Boston, and 17-year-old Monty, real name Ontario Williams, in January of 2024, in a busy, crowded downtown area of the city called The Loop. The brazen nature of these murders and the crowded area where it took place would cause this incident to get major news coverage, where the CPD would even hold a major press conference following the murder. Drill fans have concluded through their research that they were simply killed because Monty ran off with Lil Jeff's watch and bragged about it. But the next month, Lil Jeff would release his breakout song titled Ah, where he would basically brag about the murder and mock them in the whole song with lines like, they did what they did and had to pay the consequence. And other lines which included, he was yelling ah when he got hit and just walked into Lids and got 2 hats. And for those who don't know, hats are basically modern slang for bodies or murder. Which, isn't it crazy that a human life is reduced to a hat? But I digress though. He even posted multiple stories on Instagram after it happened, which fans had pieced together in order to verify his involvement. And he was involved in other antics as well, which includes one where he simulated another murder he was rumored to have committed, which now is not uncommon in the drill world. Anyways, after this he would keep coming out with songs that had these self-incriminating lyrics in them that verified his reputation in the streets, and was getting millions of views in his music videos doing so. He would even do an interview where he would dodge questions about murder and even snorted in the middle of the interview. This was about a month before he was killed, and the interview in my eyes highlights the deeply nihilistic and hopeless aspect of the gangster lifestyle that's often neglected. But even while getting looks from labels and reaching new heights as a rapper, openly rapping about the crimes he was a part of, he was still deeply involved in the streets, maybe feeling like still being active would help boost his burgeoning career, even to the point that Lil Jeff was attempting to commit yet another murder and was chasing somebody down. This person would run into a house where someone else in this house was armed and would kill Lil Jeff, shooting him over a dozen times, where he would die at the young age of just 21 years old. Lil Jeff's alleged killer would strangely get some notoriety as he started doing interviews alluding to his involvement in this murder, and even getting a fan base within drill fandom with the quote "ungang" movement of people supporting his actions while being critical of this new quote YN crash out era even calling him the Defensive Player of the Year, which I can't even lie, adds to my feelings of modern drill being dystopian, as real people are talked about and given nicknames like their characters in some type of movie. At the time of recording this all happened about a year ago, and even though this was pretty recent, his influence is being seen as kids all over Chicago are now emulating Lil Jeff. But in this modern era, there are countless of stories that are similar to this one, but the last story I want to show that highlights just how strange this modern era of drill is the story of Nadi Osama. Nadi was a 14-year-old drill rapper from Harlem who was starting to buzz in his area alongside his older brother Didi, who was only about a year older than him. One day, on the afternoon of July 9th, 2022, Nadi was involved in a physical altercation with a 15-year-old rival gang member that was spilled into the subway station. Nadi and another person cornered him and began to strike him with broomsticks. The 15-year-old would then pull out a knife and deliver a fatal blow, where Nadi would pass away at just 14 years old. Just days before this, Nadi and Didi would drop their song called Dead Ops, which saw the two provoking their rivals heavily, but after his death, this song would reach millions of views. I bring all this up because just a few months after the death of Nadi Osama, a group called 4-1 would drop a diss song that would go down in infamy that they called the Nadi Bop. Now, 4-1 isn't a gang, and the members are not affiliated with any gang, but they make New York drill-style music, and were buzzing off their 4-1 cypher earlier in the year. But due to a lot of internal gang politics in the OYs, which are the gang that Nadi and DD belong to, they stopped being cool with a rapper named Blockwork, who would begin to work with 4-1. This would cause Nadi and the other OY rappers to preview a song which they called 41K, dissing 4-1. This made the group feel justified in dissing back after Nadi had already died. So they created the Nadi Bop, which is a song where the death of this 14-year-old kid was the focal point. And they even created a dance where they would punch their hips, which simulated someone being. In spite of the quite frankly demented nature of this song, it would actually blow up on TikTok, where it became a sensation, with kids all over the platform doing the dance and even convincing their teachers to join in, with them being oblivious to the origins of the dance. The group went from buzzing rappers to absolutely blowing up and basically coming up from dissing Nadi Osama. Outside of articles from mainstream media outlets like in the New Yorkers, The Death of a Generation, or in Pitchfork's The Exploitation of New York Drill hits a disturbing new low. The hip-hop world was surprisingly silent about this disturbing trend, dance, and diss song. But the reason why I highlighted the fact that 4-1 isn't gang affiliated is not to call them fake or studio gangsters, but for you guys to see just how opportunistic this diss song was to them, as they knew what this track would do for their careers, and they saw it as a marketing opportunity. Also, I'm not condoning dissing the dead by any means, but one could make an argument that if you're in a gang, it's kind of understandable if you have a childhood friend who got killed and people were dissing him, you might want to diss them and their dead friends back. But it seems that with the Nadi Bop, this was just a business move, as now they have full-on hits that are played in the club. It's clear that they could rap and they have the skills, but it's the way that they made a name for themselves that rubs many, including myself, the wrong way. But the stories of Bloodhound Lil Jeff, Nadi Osama, and the countless other stories involved in modern drill, where lost kids kill each other and rap about it, came a flurry of YouTube documentaries covering the murders and the complex gang politics associated with their names. These YouTubers were getting a bag and millions of views off of the backs of these tragedies that also, quite frankly, rubs many the wrong way. As Lil Bill talked about in his video, many creators hide behind the guise of journalism to defend making this exploitative content, saying stuff like, oh, this is just public information and I'm just reporting it, while the titles and thumbnails are made to be the most eye-grabbing and shocking in order to get the most engagement, basically sensationalizing this dysfunction in hoods across America. While it's clear that many of these creators don't even follow the journalistic integrity, as Lil Bill also pointed out in his video that they do not protect the subjects of their videos, with creators oftentimes incriminating said subjects in crimes they could be charged with in the future, as seen in the flurry of documentaries made on Q50, the Bloodhounds, and especially Lil Durk, with his most recent murder for hire case coming to light. Trap Lord Ross is seen as the worst example of this, as he went on Vlad TV with a folder of his most incriminating lyrics, calling it the Durk Files, which just feels slimy. Also, a lot of these creators spread misinformation rapidly, as many murders covered in these documentaries are pinned on people who are still living. Take the murder of HK from O Block, who was killed in 2017, as an example. Many YouTubers pinned this murder on specific members at STL/CBT, including Wooski, but it eventually came out that he was killed in a botched robbery by a man who had a license to carry. But this situation just goes to show how these creators just run with narratives that are discussed on Reddit by people who are insulated from that environment. So while we're on the subject of the content surrounding drill and its consumption, I'd like to get into the weeds of other arguments that content creators use to defend themselves. And I don't want to get too much in my leftist bag, but many creators use the hyper-capitalistic and borderline libertarian excuse that, oh, people want to see the content about this, so we just give the people what they want to see. As content on drill music overall tends to get an insane amount of views and engagement online, whether it's interviews, full-length documentaries on the complex game politics of any given area, or even news updates, content on drill music kills it all over social media, as many can't look away at the dysfunction that plagues low-income neighborhoods all over America and across the globe. This is even reflected in many figures in the early drill scene having a career renaissance by doing interviews basically reminiscing on old war stories, and also speaking on dead gang members that the public have an interest in, while giving their thoughts on the developments in modern drill, as seen with people like Tay Capone, J-Mane, King Yella, and FBG Butta, among others, with even J-Mane from Jaro City attempting to, quote, push peace between gangs, which is admirable, but most people question if his heart is in the right place or if he's doing it just for clout and to build his platform. Also, some of those who were loosely affiliated with key figures in the early drill wave are getting big bags on social media, especially people like Trenton's News, which is basically like a gossip column of modern drill. There's so much demand, in fact, that these figures in drill who had some association with the early pioneers of the genre are getting jailhouse interviews where they discuss the early days of this era with people like Duck, Lil Reese, and Chief Keef. So clearly, there is demand for all of this, as there are whole channels dedicated to these stories, whether they make documentaries or conduct interviews with people who are actually there. Hell, some even say that No Jumper as a channel was saved by interviewing drill figures. But the question still stands, why is there so much demand for drill music? It's pretty simple really, it's all psychological. Drill and similar topics scratches that itch in our primal monkey brain, as in modern society, most of us are insulated from any real danger for the most part. So it's intriguing for many to look at and learn about these kids who fall into gang life and don't follow any of the laws that govern our society. It's interesting for people to dive deep in a world that's foreign to them, but real life for many living in poverty. Now, as a white and Hispanic passing mixed man, I really can't go deep into this, but Lil Bill dives deep into the racial aspect of drill content and its consumption, comparing it to zoos, as people consume and get a kick out of the dysfunction that is real to many all over the world, which I think is a strong comparison. This is also seen in another style of content that has been lucrative in covering drill, which is hood vlogs, where they cover the story while actually interviewing the people involved, so they get to tell their own stories. This style of content has some quality to it, as they are really just third parties to rappers getting their stories out there, while others play into the dysfunction. I say this because if you look at most hood vlogs, it seems like any low-income neighborhood is the most dangerous hood in America. But while it can be seen as admirable that in these vlogs, the people living this life are telling their own stories, the proliferation of these videos does give a, oh, look at these dysfunctional people killing each other for no reason, exactly like the zoo comparison Lil Bill made. But this specific style of content is just an offshoot of the bigger poverty tourism content style that's all over YouTube. This specific style of content tends to give viewers some sort of psychological gratification. I mean, just look at any comment section of the Soft White Underbelly channel. There's a bunch of comments of people expressing gratitude for their upbringings and their problems in comparison to the subjects in these videos. I can see the viewers of these hood vlogs getting the same feeling when watching videos of kids at war with people who are literally walking distance away from them, However, that's just mere speculation. Research does show the same phenomenon in the reality TV boom of the 2000s, where people would watch these train wrecks on TV and maybe on a subconscious level think to themselves, my life isn't so bad compared to this. It's all poverty corn, where viewers who aren't exposed to poverty get a glimpse into what it's really like and see kids as young as 13 years old getting sucked into the gang lifestyle. As we'll discuss further, it's entertainment to some, but very much real life for others. It's all very similar to the booming industry that is true crime, all over the internet and on TV, as true crime and drill content is a means for humans to engage in the more dangerous aspects of our society without having to really expose themselves to that environment. It's the morbid curiosity surrounding these cases that are so gripping to many. Just like how people look at, the cases of Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, or the Columbine shooters and ponder how these people ended up like this. I could see people doing the same thing with figures in drill, wondering how they could go from regular kids to being teenagers with countless murders attached to their names. And just like how these serial killers end up gaining notoriety in a morbid fan base, it's the same with drill. Fans of drill music end up looking at these real life gang wars like it's some sort of sick game or reality show as they discuss who was the most savage. Or in the case of Lil Durk, when King Von got killed, there was this whole Slide for Von campaign that culminated in the deaths of multiple people, including Lil Pab, the cousin of Quando Rondo, with the feds believing that this was all facilitated by Lil Durk himself, with him fighting for his freedom as we speak. But before he got locked up, he was in interviews saying that people can't say Slide for Von anymore, alluding to getting revenge. So we can't place all the blame on fans, but is pressuring Durk to Slide for Von not crazy? But also, drill enthusiasts end up playing internet detective when it comes to these complex gang wars, and in some cases, they solve these murders faster than the police. Take the recent murder of Munna Duke from O Block. The day he died, internet detectives found an Instagram story of people with an O Block chain that clearly had blood on it, with many people jumping to the conclusion that these people were responsible. It's entertainment to people, and that's what YouTubers who make content around drill music maximize for, with their AI thumbnails, clickbait titles, with quotes from these rappers that they never even said to begin with. It's all the name of the game of being a YouTuber, but what many have a problem with is that you're dealing with real people and real lives that face the real and oftentimes fatal consequences of the gang lifestyle. Take Lil Durk and his current murder for hire case. Right after he got hit with these charges, YouTubers raced to drop videos on the situation, with many irresponsibly connecting Durk to these murders that, mind you, is still an ongoing case. One could argue that it's important to document drill because it's history, and I could definitely see that, as the music being so intertwined with gang wars all over the world is unprecedented, but many have an issue with the way that these videos are executed, without any type of nuance. One could also argue that some of these videos are made well, which I could see, but also I'd argue that the whole slop content thing that's been ravaging YouTube is also heavily seen with drill content, with people summarizing the lives, murders, and death of these kids and throwing together a quick thumbnail for clicks without even attempting to discuss the nuances that draw these lost kids into this lifestyle to begin with, which I will address in a little bit. Or as we discussed before, content creators running with rumors that aren't even verified. But to circle back to the point I made earlier, this is real life for many of us growing up in poverty all over the world. Just look at this clip of Sean C attempting to react to Channel 5's video on O Block, where he basically gets triggered and breaks down after seeing a picture of Tuka while trying to keep it together.
OD's murder was allegedly in retaliation for the murder of Shondale Tuka Gregory, a rival gang member who lived just a few blocks away on 63rd.
Those the sad years of my life.
I should not have watched this video, bro. Jesus Christ. Niggas, bro, stop. it's just pictures like these. I got so many pictures with this little font. When you took the little old digital camera, you take the picture, it's got the little date on it. And there's so many pictures I have of these where old friends of mine they just dead. They just gone. Taking pictures just like this, doing something, having a good time at a party, in front of the school. And like this the last thing, like this the last time niggas who, you know, I grew up with, or people just stop at 15, 16, 17 years old. And then like, this is the last. I don't even get to see you as an adult. I can't even think or imagine what you would be, what you would look like, who you would be at my age. I'm older than you now, and you used to be older than me when we grew up together. Like, it's fucked. It's fucked
out
up.
here just had my first child and everything. I'm really like...
Seeing this clip really illustrates that gun violence and the topics covered in the content may be mere entertainment for some, but for others it's a personal experience. Now, speaking from personal experience, this was real life for me too. Now, I did not grow up in gang dance areas like LA or Chicago, where you walk down one block and that's one gang territory, and you walk down 3 blocks and that's a whole nother territory. So gangs were not omnipresent in my area growing up like they were in LA and Chicago, but gangs were enough of a presence in my neighborhood that there's a Swamp Stories video on the area where I grew up in. So as a kid, you really don't think about it, but as you grow older, your parents start to explain things to you, really, to protect you. Like, for example, I had certain conversations with my parents where they explained to me that I couldn't wear certain colors. Like, one conversation I remember vividly is my parents explaining to me that you can't hang out or be friends with someone who's affiliated because you might be killed just for hanging out with them, or you could be caught with them at the wrong place at the wrong time. And around my senior year in high school, an incident like this happened very close to my childhood home that I don't want to get too into here, but this event even caused Trump to come to my hometown the next year, which was just surreal to say the least. I even remember friends of mine being regular kids around the 6th or 7th grade, but as we got older, they began to get affiliated, and things changed really quickly. I bring all this up because it's not just content, it's our real lives, and kids growing up in these rough environments have to learn to navigate with all this in the best way possible, but many of these kids end up falling prey to it, and that's exactly why drill content rubs many the wrong way. With many using shocking imagery made by AI to bring clicks in, or buzzwords like savage, demon, or most recently, YNs. The YN thing is a whole other topic that I won't get too into here because again, look at me, I'm a white passing mixed dude. But to put it simply, I think YN comes from TikTok, and I know the YN thing has taken over social media as there are viral tweets and videos of these quote YNs going crazy weekly. There's even videos titled The Inflation of YNs, Gifted YNs, Fake YNs, and other titles too. Like, the whole thing is getting pretty ridiculous at this point. But this whole thing is just the latest iteration of this phenomenon that simply dehumanizes kids growing up in this rough environment, and the proliferation of this term is honestly concerning to me. As you can see, any black teenager and some people's first thought could go to YN, which is just a surreal phenomenon. It reminds me of the whole super predator thing of the 90s, infamously said by Hillary Clinton, but it feels like another means of fear-mongering. This sort of sentiment is seen by many across generations of the past, as they have a different view of the new generation as being a different breed, being wild and out of control. But instead of being inflated by politicians trying to pass tough on crime bills like in the 90s, the sentiment of the YN is just another buzzword meant to increase clicks and engagement on social media. But as I would like to emphasize, this has real life consequences. These kids who get wrapped up in gang life look at all the views, clout, and riches other rappers are able to achieve from speaking about the life they actually live and decide to do it themselves. But it doesn't always work out the way that they planned. Because when you're dissing the dead and bragging about dirt that was done in the streets, that increases the chance for death or incarceration. Take the case of Noah Scurry, who was a star basketball player in Philly and was being scouted by colleges, but he was also a gang member. a gang member who was rumored to have taken part in 4 murders. He released a song under the name Joker OTV, where he alluded to his body count and dissed dead rivals heavily. In the video, he is seen wearing gloves and a mask in order to hide his identity, but it seems that this was not effective, as just 1 day later, he was killed on his way to school, right in front of his parents, at the young age of just 17 years old, with many jumping at the chance to make videos about this topic right after it happened, or provide some sort of commentary. But it seems that the music may also be influencing the kids, as it looks cool to them, with many YNs pulling up to Drewski's Could Have Been Records audition in Baltimore. These kids are around 13 years old, in shiesty masks, signaling standing over people, and rapping about sliding on ops. At least Drewski did attempt to talk some sense into them, but it goes to show how the music may be influencing the youth. Now, I'm never one to scapegoat the music, as the music is just a mere reflection of real life. But most East Coast cities don't even have a huge gang presence, especially Baltimore, so I find it telling that these kids are dressed like rappers from Chicago, which in my eyes definitely does show that the music is now having an influence on the youth. But all this to say that the relationship between social media and drill is one that feeds on each other. In this rage bait, slop, viral era we find ourselves in, drill is the perfect vehicle to drive up engagement, with gripping headlines of teenage killers and bodies being dropped all over low-income neighborhoods, but only a few profit while many suffer. Which is why I even wanted to make this video to begin with, as I picked up on this phenomenon, and it really hit me how fucked this all is. But at least now, there's actually discourse surrounding all this. One thing I want to mention real quick is the fact that these YouTubers are starting to get very comfortable, and it's showing. I'm not trying to make this a call-out video by any means, but there's a few instances that really stuck out in my head. One being this clip of Trap Lord Ross, the person who made the documentary about King Von allegedly being a serial killer, but he would go on to get a tattoo of King Von, and when discussing it with 1090 Jake, he explained that he got it with 7 skulls to represent the people he killed, because he wouldn't be King Von without the bodies.
How many skulls are on that tattoo?
Hey, you know there's 7 skulls on that tattoo, man.
Do you think it's disrespectful in any way?
A lot of people have commented that, like, oh, the skulls, this is too much. He's not King Von without the murders.
Which I usually have more to say, but man, what the fuck? These are real people who were murdered, many not making it past 18, but they're just reduced to skulls, reduced to notches in King Von's belt. Like, clearly, that's dehumanization of real lives. Real people with goals, dreams, and people who love them, reduced to skulls. Which further shows how this is just entertainment for some. And I'm gonna explain in a little bit why kids are so drawn to the gang lifestyle. But when I look at the kids who were killed in these gang wars, many of them remind me of kids who I went to school with myself. So I really can't look at these pictures without getting emotional. But another instance of this was when the mother of FBT Duck and Brick sued the estate of King Von for the death of her son and profiting off of it. Adam 22 then called her out for this in a clip, where he said, quote,
"You know, I always want to have your back, but sometimes you just be doing the goofiest shit ever. This has got to be one of the lowest of the lows in the history of drill music, that she has taken it upon herself to sue Lil Durk, King Von's estate, Dolce & Gabbana for not having adequate security outside of their store, etc. Like, just reading through the news articles about this is some of the craziest shit I ever seen. Mama Duck, newsflash, your son was embroiled in a gang war. Anytime one of his ops died, he promptly made songs about it, posted about it on social media. He was no better than the rest. Long live Duck, but he was on the same exact bullshit that Durk, Von, etc. were on. And now you're out here filing a lawsuit just because Durk happens to be rich. Like, this is some real sad shit. And
this clip really speaks for itself, but I know that No Jumper is primarily a hip-hop platform, but I just don't think it's his place to say, hey, it's goofy for you to do that, or call her out in a pretty disrespectful way. But the last situation that clearly shows content creators getting too comfortable is when Swamp Stories called in on No Jumper. Now, for context, Swamp Stories made a video on No Jumper's co-host Brick Baby, where he would go over his life and crimes while also implying that it was Brick who gave Lil Durk Quando Rondo's location when he was in LA, as Brick has close ties to Durk, which would have him wrapped up in a RICO case if true. So that's wild to even speculate on that. But after this, he will go on No Jumper, asking Brick some pretty insanely out-of-pocket questions.
Well, I don't think you guys should be good so quickly, because you are out here trying to convince the whole world that he's a snitch, one of the worst labels you could put on a motherfucker from the streets.
Listen, I got questions, Brick.
Yeah.
All right. On the video, you caught about 4 straight Class A felonies in Georgia, back to back in the span of 2 years.
Yeah.
And you never went to prison. What the fuck happened?
I had a great attorney. I went to trial. How you say that shit disappeared when I went to trial on the gun case?
I'm just
You
saying.
can't look up the trial on the gun case?
That's all. Huh?
I said you can't look up the trial on the gun case. My shit got dismissed in trial.
Listen, I had a paralegal go through your. This is why the video took so
We
long.
could
I
call
had a
Daniel
paralegal-
Kane.
Huh?
I said I could call my lawyer. I could call Daniel Kane. You should be able to go research any type. I've never had an interrogation. The only one I had an interrogation on was probably when I was 17.
And after this, he will go on to ask him about one of his best friends named Eric Holder, who is the person who killed Nipsey Hussle in the most out-of-pocket fashion, where he basically asks, why didn't you have Eric Holder's back? Like, are we not going to act like that's not hella disrespectful? I'm not here to call out other YouTubers. That's not what this channel is about. But it's one thing for these channels to cover these topics, but it's another thing for these content creators to overtly disrespect the subjects of these videos, while also speculating on the roles they may have committed in particular crimes, and just straight up not knowing their place, which I might add is actually really dangerous for them. One thing I also want to add is that the hyperinflation of drill music, with rappers becoming increasingly more disrespectful, speaking on more real-life incidents, and upping the ante with social media, is just a symptom of a bigger problem. That being, rappers using a gimmick to get on and noticed by the industry. As social media becomes a bigger influence on our lives, rappers have been using it to get more exposure, as seen with the immense amount of talent to come out of the blog era. But now rappers need to do more crazy and outrageous things to get noticed, making the antics of the SoundCloud Supreme Patty era look tame in comparison. Just look at people like Ice Spice, who used her unique look and twerking every 5 seconds to get major industry connections, or Dave Blunt's using the whole I'm really big and really get out of my seat angle to get more clicks, and also just openly using slurs in his music to appeal to edgy teenagers as a marketing strategy. It's clear that this era of social media we find ourselves in, rappers are trying their best to stand out by any means in order to get noticed. You even see this with the amount of on-the-radar freestyles that go viral. But before I forget, I want to mention Lil Mabu, who's a rapper from New York City who cosplays as a drill rapper while leaning into the whole nerdy white kid gimmick, especially with the song Mathematical Disrespect. The whole thing is just strange and adds to my feeling of drill being dystopian, because he's LARPing as a drill rapper while being insulated from everything that comes from that lifestyle. There's nothing else I can really say about that. Like, New York is going outside, bro. We're really going outside. He may not be the best political YouTuber, as we pretty much disagree on everything, but what if Altis pointed out that social media pushes what gets the most clicks, and that just happens to be things like violence, lust, and disgust, which after he said that, I couldn't help but notice it everywhere. Now, where am I going with all this? Well, this is a phenomenon that's seen everywhere, and that includes drill music, with there essentially being a race to get the most attention through all this death and destruction through disrespectful songs. I could list off countless examples, but a few that come to mind is Q50 posing with 9 hats in his music video, alluding to the fact that he might have 9 bodies, or YBC Duel being known as Mr. Disrespectful, going to his op's grave and digging up a little bit of it, or the song I found called Tips on How to Catch a Murder that has over 7 million views, where he basically gives you tips on doing it, telling you that you should leave your phone at home because it might get tracked, and all this other stuff, which is just bizarre, and I don't really know what else to call it. But a few years back, you even saw this with K-Flock too, who was known for spinning his op's territory on live before even rapping, but he would continue to do this even as he was getting millions of views on YouTube. I can't help but think that he thought that this would help his career as a rapper, as being seen as real or really like that. But this would culminate in December 2021 with him FaceTiming his ops, walking through their neighborhood where he was spotted, and then he would get into an argument with one of them as he would shoot this op in self-defense as he was clutching his gun. K-Flock was acquitted of that charge, but this case was wrapped up in a bigger RICO indictment of his gang Sevside, where he now faces a number of years in prison. Fans have also pointed out how he seems comfortable in jail, and to this I say, well, yeah, drill rappers are street dudes first and foremost, they just so happen to rap. But this phenomenon is even seen in hood vlogs where YouTuber Brandon Buckingham and his crew were shot at while doing a vlog with Chicago rapper Q50, and Brandon's cameraman was even shot in the neck but luckily survived, while being shockingly calm during this whole ordeal. This situation could have ended even worse, but it ended up being one of his most viewed videos. But it's situations like this where the rage bait, attention over everything style of content is adding to this already existing issue. And that makes me see drill as dystopian, because how can anyone not see this? These antics being spread all over social media also adds fuel to the fire, helping to increase the two most likely consequences of the streets, even if you're a rapper with motion, that being death or incarceration, which is also seen with the huge number of cases rappers are catching, or even there being music videos where everyone in it has been killed. This, however, directly ties into what I want to explore next. Why are kids so drawn to the gang life to begin with? Well, it's widely known by now that there is a direct correlation between poverty and crime due to the lack of opportunity. It's these circumstances that are one of the leading causes of children joining gangs and engaging in criminal activity. But this is actually backed up by study after study and every article I came across that explores this topic. In an article by the American Academy of Children and Adolescent Psychiatry, they listed off all the factors that may lead a child into gang life, which included growing up in an area with heavy gang activity, a history of gang involvement in the family, which is seen time and time again, especially with kids from Chicago or LA where gang culture is very prominent, but also other things to add to it, like a history of violence in the home, too little adult supervision, unstructured free time, a lack of positive role models, and exposure to media like television, movies, and music that glorifies gang violence. But other things too, like low self-esteem, a sense of hopelessness about the future because of limited educational or financial opportunities, and underlying mental health issues or behavioral disorders. Many of these factors I've seen anecdotally in my own life. For example, an unnamed person in my personal life had a father who was not in the picture, and his mother was a nurse who worked nights, so she would sleep during the day. And since she was asleep during that time, he would skip school and basically run the streets as a teenager. And he was able to get away with rarely going to school and running the streets, but I will say that other factors may have contributed to this too. Another key factor I like to explore is the lack of financial opportunity, which was seen heavily in the 80s and in the 90s with the crack era. Many people who survived this time period point to the lack of opportunity for why they decided to sell drugs. AZ Faison, who is the man behind the Painful movie, was drawn to that life as he dropped out of school to work full-time in order to support his family, but the allure of fast money was too much to ignore. One other example I want to highlight is the peer pressure to either join a gang or to do what your friends are doing. This is a little easier to understand, as validation and social approval is literally ingrained in us as humans, and especially in our early years, peer pressure is a major factor in anything. But in crime-ridden or gang-infested neighborhoods, being down or about it is the pressure a lot of youth feel. The late great rapper Ka also reflected on this in his interview with Red Bull Academy. For those who are unaware, Ka was a rapper from Brownsville, Brooklyn, who started getting a buzz later in life, in his 40s, and a lot of his lyrics are him reflecting on his time in Brooklyn during the crack era, doing dirt to survive, but not letting it consume him as he held on to his humanity. But in this interview, he will go on to explain, in his own words, quote,
you know, I'm just like, all right, fuck it. Let's just go make money and, you know, let's walk around with guns because that's what everybody doing. And we not fighting no more. We gonna have to start shooting each other. And that's just what it was. Like, so it was weird. So yeah, I was thrown in. Like, you know, I'm surprised I'm here right now. So it's just good that I'm survived all that.
I mean, it's important to mention because I think, like, from the outside, you know, people who may have a more conservative perspective on things will say, well, just don't get involved. And it's not that simple.
Oh yeah, it's not that simple. It's like, You want to be the sucker in Brownsville? I don't think so. I mean, you don't want to be the sucker wherever y'all from, but to be a sucker where there's a bunch of predators, that ain't it. You know, and I wasn't a sucker. It was no way. You know, I'm gonna do what we doing. This is what we doing. I'm doing that. You know what I mean? So just to be not ostracized in the neighborhood. You know, like, yeah, you know, we got guns. We got guns too. So.
And in this clip, he speaks on the sentiment of engaging in this behavior as a means of survival. What Ka says harkens to the forces that lead kids into this lifestyle. It's about blending in, survival, and adaptation. Like Ka said, you don't want to be a sucker in Brownsville or any environment for that matter. So you join in and succumb to the peer pressure, but soon you start doing dirt, becoming desensitized to those activities, and you progress to worse crimes. This is precisely how kids become shooters and killers. This sentiment is further explored by Shanika Shakur, also known as Monster Cody, in his book Monster, which was one of the first detailed glimpses the American public got into life as a gang member. But in this 1993 interview, he goes on to explain why he became an 8-trade gangster Crip at just 11 years old after an incident where he was jumped and robbed. But when reflecting on this, he would say, quote,
"Why would an 11-year-old want to carry a gun and go out and kill people?"
It was necessary. It was either I got with the power or I was a victim. Either you get with it or you don't. It's pressure, peer pressure. It's normal. And this is normality. There's no measuring stick for normality where we live. And so whatever happens to be the trend at that particular time, which was shooting people, was the normal thing to do. It didn't matter that I was 11. You know, I could have been 9.
I want to read you something that you wrote. "My participation in the gangs came as second nature. To be in a gang in South Central when I joined, and it's still the case today, is the equivalent of growing up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan and going to college. Everyone does it."
Everyone does it. And those who don't are considered weak, because now we have a measuring stick, and the measuring stick is to be a gunfighter, to be a fighter. You know, that's the measuring stick to manhood in our community now, as was the case then.
What did you like about the people that were in the Crips in your neighborhood?
The power they seemed to wield. They had this allure. They were free. See, you had two classes. You had the victims and you had the assailants. And the assailants always seemed to be my heroes because they seemed to come away victorious every time.
These two instances on opposite coasts of each other reflect the same theme, that being adapt or die. These kids simply adapt to the rough environment they just so happen to be born into, with the decision that these two made as children affecting them for the rest of their lives. As Monster Cody spent a number of years in prison, while Ka became a captain as a FDNY firefighter, while also on the side reflecting on the decisions he made as a youth in his music. But Monster Cody's mother in particular took an active role in trying to prevent him from falling into gangs, with her explaining in the same broadcast, quote,
"I'd like to think that had I not had to work 2 jobs, I could have spent a little more time and maybe he would not have become a monster."
Did you try and stop him?
Of course. I tried everything. Cub Scouts, I went. Child guardians, everything that I could reach out and try and get a hold of just to get some help, some kind of help. It just couldn't come fast enough because there were too many other children that were having the same kind of problem, parents having the same kind of problem, and there were too many people ahead of my little guy. And as time was moving on, he was moving on. So there was just no help.
This broadcast was done back in 1993, so they did not have the level of understanding to really grasp why kids join gangs. But in this broadcast, the reporter attempted to confront Monster Cody about how his set of circumstances weren't the, quote, stereotypical reasons as to why kids join gangs. And Cody offers a masterful rebuttal, explaining, quote,
"You don't have most of the usual excuses. You didn't grow up in the projects. You had a very strong mother. Your biological father is
absent. missing in action.
An NFL football player?
But yeah, I hear you.
Your godfather's Ray Charles?
Yeah. But while my mother's at work being a working class woman, while my father was on the football field, while Ray was in the recording studio, I was in the street. You know what I mean? I was being influenced by social forces that they couldn't even touch, couldn't even understand. And my mother couldn't protect me from that. Ray couldn't come get me all the time. And Dick never came. But, you know what I mean? So.
Do you resent that?
To a great extent, no doubt about it. I hate him. You know what I mean? I hate him because I think about what I could have been, you know? And I can't dig that, man. You're running out of your kids, you know? You know, father thing, man. But that's just heavy to me now, you know? That's just heavy.
Would it have made a difference, do you think?
Yeah, because I wouldn't have to go to the street to find the street people, you know? To find, you know, people in the street, you know?
He says he's put that life behind him. He's adopted the African name Senyika Shakur.
Stories like Monster Cody's truly highlights how some kids just fall through the cracks, as he was clearly a very sharp and intelligent man, but the streets got to him at an early age, and after that, as we all know, there's no going back. But before getting into my next point, this is something I want to emphasize. A lot of kids who fall into gang life show promise and potential, but they really just fall through the cracks. Personally, someone else in my personal life was sent to the army in the 70s due to him running the streets. And while he was serving in the military, his sergeants would notice how he had great leadership potential. But once he came home from the army and he was back in his own environment, the streets got a hold of him once again. These examples really paint a picture showing how if these kids had the right guidance, got validation in the right areas, and were given real direction, they might not have fallen to the streets. But there's another reason why kids fall to it, and this reason is a lot more psychological. In the paper, The Social Psychology of Gangs, an intergroup communication perspective, they go on to explain in depth why children are drawn to gangs, saying, quote,
"Why youth join gangs can be explained, in the main, as a motivated response to two major conditions: having an unfavorable identity, or feeling uncertain about one's identity."
With this article explaining further that,
together, these constructs and processes form the foundation for one central assumption of social identity theory. Obtaining or maintaining a favorable and well-defined self-concept or social identity motivates behavior. Hence, individuals have a desire and tendency to define their self-concept in terms of their group memberships.
Which is something that I interpret as children not having a strong sense of identity or self-image, and they look to gangs to help define it, as in their own warped way, gangs give children community. This is further explored in the detailed paper where they explain, quote,
"When youth do not have strong relationships at home, school, or with their community, they can lack a distinct identity, often including a sense of solidarity with a shared family identity. As a result, they turn to gangs for companionship and a sense of family and cultural enrichment and, thus, construct a more satisfying social identity."
As we discussed before and is explored in depth in this paper, there are a number of reasons that marginalized children feel the need to join gangs. Whichever reason it is, it gives children a sense of instability, especially in self-perception. And as Monster Cody put it, he thought about would he rather be the victim or the one with the power, and we all know which path he chose. With this deeply insightful paper going on to explain, quote,
"People who struggle with feelings of marginalization have difficulty establishing an identity and tend to have lower levels of self-esteem. Hence again, and for marginalized youth, joining a gang can be appealing as it provides such youth with a valued identity."
I could say when reading over this paper, it really connected many dots in my mind about how kids could be heavily victimized in a number of ways, and when they join a gang, they have an outlet for their negative feelings, such as rage, resentment, and deep-seated anger. Children, oftentimes especially in marginalized groups, have a hard time coming to terms and processing any trauma they may have gone through, leading them to act out. Gangs, in my view, provide a perfect outlet for these feelings, and in the process, kids who join gangs shed their old skin of being victims to circumstance in their home or in other areas to feeling powerful. This is especially seen in kids literally being given new names to go along with their affiliations, which further psychologically reinforces this new identity. As messed up as it sounds, violence feels powerful, and this sentiment is explored in the Bastards of the Party documentary, where they explore the pipeline between the Black Panther Party's demise and the rise of gangs in California. In this excerpt where they say, quote,
just meant the youth of the movement. The older brothers teach the younger brothers, we emulate their example. So our example was revolution.
It was a line in the book that said the Crips and Bloods are the bastard offspring of the political parties of the 60s. The leadership falling apart in the Black Panther Party, the US organization, and most of the gangs were born out of the demise of those parties. You know what I mean? So out of the ashes of the Black Panther Party came, gangs, Crips, Bloods, etc.
We was taught that we want power. Power go to your head. When you learn the power of violence, it can be devastating.
These kids got together. They knew to do that, but they got together with no leadership.
When you take something away from a community or people, the community will replace it with something. When you took the leadership away in the 60s, the youth replaced it with something. We seeked our own leadership. We felt basically that the leaders of the 60s failed us because we didn't quite comprehend what they stood for. The act of violence totally on the people without a people fighting back. It didn't make any sense to youngsters. So we formed our gangs and we dealt with our own brand of leadership. Today they call it Bloods and Crips.
So speaking from experience, my brothers and I actually went through some difficult times during our teenage years. But luckily for us, we had our love of music to help us stay away from something more destructive. It might sound strange, but for the uninitiated, hardcore and its adjacent scenes have a violent element to it. So the moshing and the crowd killing we were getting into, at least for me, was cathartic. So being around older kids during this time, it was actually encouraged. And at my age now, I can see how this was an outlet for a confusing time in my life. But tying all this together, basically I know this dynamic very well, as I could see kids who join gangs not only being incentivized to commit violence, but being praised for doing so, thus making the behavior not only normalized, but becoming who you are. Matter of fact, Take Capone from 600 spoke on this when he discussed how, when he went on his first drill, the next day the older guys were talking about it, like, damn, you heard those shots? And they didn't know it was Tay, but this made him smile from ear to ear. But many kids start by committing petty crimes and graduate to bigger and more violent crimes. This is a sentiment I've seen the YouTuber Big Herc speak on in multiple interviews, where when telling his story, he always emphasizes the fact that he didn't just wake up one day and decide to rob a bank. His choices led to a series of events that made him okay with doing that. It was a process of desensitization over time, and this happens to a higher degree all over the world. In Chicago specifically, people do speak on this in interviews, explaining how people start by defending the neighborhood from ops who come through shooting, but slowly get deeper into it by committing more violent crimes, and then there's no going back. The social psychology of gangs would further explore the idea of kids shedding their old skin by saying, quote,
able to fill this void, gangs offer adolescents a much-needed sense of belonging. Because of their vulnerable age, youth are especially susceptible to the appeal of what gangs have to offer, a peer group of which they can be a part, a clear personal and social identity, increased autonomy from parents or guardians, a path to manhood, albeit violent, for males, and the means by which to improve their social status.
They would lastly go on to say, quote,
that is, joining a gang can offer the sense of belongingness that family, school, and community may not always provide for at-risk youth. Thus, violent gang behaviors per se are not the primary attraction for youth to join a gang, but the allure of being able to fill the identity void can be a stronger factor, propelling young people to become involved in a gang, which eventually can lead to risky and criminal behaviors.
So there are stories of people making it out through rapping or other mediums, but some face the deadly consequences before they even reach adulthood, as seen in many modern drill scenes. There's actually one story in Monster Cody's book that really stood out to me. This is where a teenage gangbanger around 13 to 14 years old gets shot close to where Monster Cody lives. And everyone would flood the streets during the aftermath, and the kid is crying, telling his friend to quote, "Tell my mama I'm not gonna gangbang anymore. I'm gonna do good. I'm gonna do better." It's been a number of years since I read this book, but from what I remember, the child would not make it, dying from his wounds. It's such a big risk joining a gang, as some mature and grow out of it and become successful, while others face the consequences of that lifestyle as a child. If war is hell, then this is exactly what these children are living in. Not only learning to survive in this environment, but thrive and take pleasure in it. So when you see comments like, "Oh, it's pointless, they're fighting over property they don't even own," remember the complex social forces at play that draws these kids into the gang life to begin with. Drill is a genre that pushes gangster rap to its limits. It pushed gangster rap to raw and daring new heights, as instead of just giving listeners fictional stories on murder or old accounts on life in the streets, rappers would speak on real-life gang politics and incidents in the streets. Dissing the dead became commonplace, but as rappers like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, and Lil Reese started to see bigger success on a national scale, a mainstream crowd began to be exposed to a real-life gang war, and public interest grew. Although gangster rap in its more traditional form was still seeing success in the coke rap resurgence with rappers like Pusha T, Freddie Gibbs, and the whole Griselda crew, drill became the biggest and most prominent form of the genre as drill scenes began to pop up all over America and across the globe. Drill is something that some would argue is the natural next step in gangster rap, as gang wars have been commonplace in low-income neighborhoods all over the United States since at least the 70s. It's the same thing that happened to metal as the years went by. Bands began to get more and more extreme, becoming darker and more brutal, both lyrically and sonically. This is exactly what happened with drill, as rappers began to speak on real-life murders and diss dead members of their rival sets, with oftentimes deadly consequences. A large number of drill rappers in the 2010s saw the street life they lived and rapped about catching up to them, either being murdered or getting lengthy prison sentences before making it out of that environment. But as drill began to grow in popularity, YouTubers like DJ Academics and College Kid began to make content surrounding not only the developments in the music, but the developments in the streets of Chicago, getting millions of views doing so. In the late 2010s, you would see how controversy sells, as rappers' careers would get boosted by the brutal crimes they may have committed, as seen with TK and YNW Melly. But the crop of drill rappers that followed the first wave would push this even further. The rise of King Von would see things change, as he wasn't just affiliated with gangs, but was linked to multiple murders, as he was the top shooter for his gang, O-Block, and would openly talk about his body count in songs. Drill rappers in other scenes, especially in Florida, would push the dissing even further, as the war they were involved in saw countless lives taken on both sides, and in songs, they would just straight up list off dead ops to provoke their rivals. The modern era we currently find ourselves in sees kids dissing other dead teens, rap groups making dances about teens being stabbed, rappers speaking on double murders they committed only a few weeks after it happened, and rappers posing with the amount of murders or hats they committed. These are only a few instances of a number of incidents in modern drill. Now, due to the slop, rage bait, attention economy of our modern social media era, the antics of rappers in general are being pushed by algorithms, as nowadays rappers get on by being the most polarizing they could be, and drill rappers are following that same formula, but oftentimes with fatal consequences. But the economy of tracking, following, and documenting the complex gang politics, murders, and dysfunction of this world is big business, as hood vlogs of the quote most dangerous hoods in America have taken over the platform, as well as carefully put together documentaries on the life and crimes of any given drill rapper. There's even shootouts happening during some of these vlogs, and it seems that many content creators are getting too comfortable with the way they speak on these real life incidents. Drill is a culture and a style of music that has truly captivated the public, as it blends the worlds of true crime and music in a way that's never been seen before. Like true crime, the wider public gets an unconscious psychological thrill out of learning about these stories, with the most dedicated fans oftentimes treating the people involved in these stories as characters, when in actuality, these are kids succumbing to the forces of their environment. Many of the subjects of these documentaries have already died, but these content creators tend to jeopardize the freedom of their subjects that are still alive for clicks and engagement, as seen with the reckless coverage of Lil Durk and his murder for hire case that's still pending. Which is why it's important to explore not only why kids are drawn to gang life to begin with, but to posit some questions like, is this all exposure or exploitation? What are the ethical implications of consuming a gang war for entertainment? It may be entertainment for some, but it's real life for many growing up in low-income areas all over the world, and that is what many see an issue with. It rubs many the wrong way. But with all this being said, all the history and the way drill has evolved over time being thoroughly explored, is the existence of drill music dystopian? Clearly yes, but it is merely a reflection of the dystopian times we live in, where gang wars are being passed down from generation to generation, with the youth who live this life making music on their experiences as a way to get out, with some quick to jump at the chance to profit. It's truly a loop that feeds on each other, where the content feeds off the music and the music feeds off of the content. But it's important to take a serious look at the complex dynamic at play with drill music.